Well, hidey ho, everybody. How you doing today? I had a very weird night's sleep last night. I tell you what, I went to bed nice and early, right? I usually don't. I stay up pretty late. I'm a bit of a night owl, honestly. And for whatever reason, I went right to sleep, but then I woke up a couple hours later. Couldn't get to sleep. Finally got back to sleep. Get a phone call from my dad like first thing in the morning. Oh well, such is life, such is life. So this is going to be kind of a sleepy stream, I wager. So, nothing wrong with that. We all have our sleepy days. We're streaming away. We're streaming today. I hope you're doing fine. There's so many streams for us to see. But this one here is mine. I hope that you're happy. I hope that you're well. Now come on and join me. Watch the world go to hell because we're streaming away. We're streaming today. Let's stream today. Got a beautiful day today. Finally, the blistering heat. We've been going through 32 Celsius here, and it's been absolutely brutal. Hey, Drew, how you doing? Today, we're at 19. Nice and beautiful day. Finally. Not sweating, just sitting in the apartment. I'm able to turn my fans down to low, not so critical with all of that. But, of course, as the temperature declines, the election only heats up. I think the thing that I've begun to really notice, that the media really just doesn't want to talk about the NDP. That they want the NDP to be out of the race. It's pretty clear. And as you'll see as we go along, I'm starting to see more just like of the classic nonsense, right? The classic let's bring up the abortion issue again. Let's bring up gun rights again. Let's bring up all of the issues that we have talked about 1,000 times before in the past. Hey, Branwyn, how you doing? All the classic wedge issues, all the classic stuff, in the hopes that we can galvanize the public to fall back into this trap of red versus blue, right? And have them butt heads with one another. And all of that is being done to just sort of obfuscate everything. Pissed Off Canadian, of course, reminding us we are skipping. Before we move along to that, we've got David Lynch here with us today. Everybody in the chat, pick a number between 1 and 10. Maybe today's the magic number for you. POC, pick a 9.
Here we go for today's number.
I'm going to go 2.
It's September 2, 2021.
It's September the 2nd, so 2 makes good
10
sense.
balls.
Come on, Brandon. We got a 1 from
Each
Drew.
ball
We got a
has
6
a
from Dan
number.
Boxes. Hey, Dan Boxes, how you doing, bud? Brandon, you in on this?
1 through 10. Swirl the
numbers. The divine number, Branwyn. Very good. It's a nice spread. I'm sure someone's going to hit it. It's somebody's
Pick
turn.
a number.
Here we go. It's been a couple of days since one of us has hit it, so it's got to be now.
Today's number is
6. Dan Boxes with the 6. Dun, 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 da, 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 da. I hope that if I hit 1,000 subscribers, it opens up options for me in the chat, I think. And I would love to be able to get some kind of thing to be able to select Dan Boxes and be put glitter on it or something. That would be so fun. Wouldn't that be? Just so every time Dan Boxes you get it, your name comes up, it would have little glitter around it. I think that would be delightful. Come on, YouTube. Let's do it. Congratulations. Yeah, go buy a lottery ticket. All right, saying farewell to the wonderful Lake Ontario. Boink. On to the news. So, always worth reporting right away. We had an explosion in Wheatley, Ontario, believed to be caused by an abandoned gas well. Is the extreme example of what can happen if such wells are not properly plugged. According to an expert hydrogeologist who has researched oil and gas wells in southern Ontario. It can happen anywhere in southwestern Ontario, said Dick Jackson. Isn't that a great name? Dick Jackson? Dude, that's like the most trustworthy name that a person can have, I think. Hey, how you doing? Certainly in like white Western culture. Guy walks in and is like, hey, I'm Dick Jackson, I'm here to fix your plumbing. I mean, like, that plumbing is going to get fixed with a name like that? Absolutely. An adjunct professor at the University of Waterloo. So, in my view, this is just the classic, like, that's a poor name. yeah, definitely. It's definitely high ranking, dude. It's definitely high ranking. Hey, Dick Jackson gets the job done. So in Ontario, the province knows within 200 meters where 27,000 of these oil and gas wells are. 3,000 are active, the other 24,000 are abandoned. How are these wells plugged? Once we plug and abandon these wells, we figure they're not going to leak. Yeah, right. Some of them will. So this is, in my view, another one of these like privatization kind of scams, right? Under something called the abandoned work programs, if you can satisfy the criteria of the abandoned works program and you float to the top of their hazardous criteria list, you will get your well plugged. The Ministry of Natural Resources is responsible for Ontario's abandoned wells. But according to Jackson, the province is in no position to do plugging work with speed. Like, this issue, I mean, here's a great aerial shot of the explosion. It's the classic kind of grift that it infects literally every aspect of our society, which is that if something is privatized and it's owned by like a private capitalist, they have no genuine reason to want to actually resolve any of this, to resolve any of the issues, right? They want to abandon the well, right? And they want to get paid to do it. That's all. Very much like the Miami building collapse, right? We remember not that long ago, about a month ago, I wager, that a building collapses in Miami, and the report shows, yeah, like people were saying that there were cracks appearing. People were saying, and just no one was doing anything about it because private industry is completely disincentivized to actually do any repairs or do anything of the sort. And this migrates completely into a BlogTO post I found. Horrifying viral video shows what it's like to live in Toronto's notorious ICE condos. Yep. Cost-cutting measures maximum budget to spend the least. Exactly. That's exactly what it is, right? If you live in Toronto, you almost certainly know of the ICE condominium complex, whether that's because at one point you popped in for an after party, visited a friend staying at an Airbnb, or read about any of the various shootings, stabbings, and other crimes that have taken place on site. Horror stories can be found all over the internet about the two-tower complex in Toronto's South Core neighborhood. But a recent pair of TikTok dispatches from a former resident really take the cake in showing how hellish it can be to live within the city's most notorious ghost hotel. I'm talking hours-long waits for elevators, constant late-night fire alarms, stairwells filled with rotten garbage, and lots of stray bullets flying around, many of which were never reported. Here's the first video. This is by 27-year-old Kylene Lukes.
I moved into the ICE condos in downtown Toronto in July 2020. There was a fire alarm my first weekend there, and basically every weekend after that.
Fire alarm has been activated.
One elevator for 29 floors for 4 months. Multiple shootings.
Fire alarm has been activated.
Trash chutes always out of order. $2,600 a month.
fire alarm has been activated. Stand by for further instructions. Department has been notified and will attempt to investigate. The fire department has arrived.
Stray bullets in residence apartment. To police dock teams on my elevator ride.
This is security pickup. This is on. Please stay calm. Please stay calm.
Bottles thrown at pedestrians and police. March 6, 2021 to 11 shots fired and never reported on. Stray bullets in the lobby. I moved into the ICE condos in downtown Toronto in
And we flipped around. Originally posted to TikTok in July, the piece below and an even crazier sequel were uploaded to Twitter last week and have since gone viral among gobsmacked, but not really, Torontonians.
Department has been notified.
That's the same video just there. Luke's moved to Toronto in 2017 after graduating from Western University. While she originally lived in the Little Italy area, her work with Tiff and as a bartender enticed her to find a place right downtown in July of 2020. My roommate and I viewed 3 or 4 units in different buildings, but our realtor really sold the ICE condos and said in the end, we signed our lease there, she told BlogTO. The landlord met us to give us the keys, then moved back overseas, where they spent the next year. We had very minimal communication after that first day. So literally the landlord for these slums, this is a slumlord, it's kind of the classic, right? Leaves the country for an entire year. Luke's was excited to be living at 12 York Street between Bremner and Harbour, just steps from the city's biggest attractions. At the time, I had high hopes moving beside the Rogers Centre and Scotiabank Arena, being a Major Leafs fan and a concert lover, she said. Somehow in 3 years of living downtown, I had neither encountered nor had been warned about the ICE buildings. It didn't take long for her to regret signing the $2,600 a month lease. A few months into the pandemic, after losing her restaurant job, Luke said that she was spending more time at home and starting to notice some major problems with the building. There was constantly a stench of garbage and trash in the halls and stairways because the garbage chutes were never operational, she said, noting that mask mandates were never enforced and social distancing was non-existent inside the building. One elevator had been down since the day we moved in. We were always told it was unknown when it would be fixed, but that the service team had been notified, she said. Oftentimes, both elevators were out of service for the low-rise floors, leaving anyone with mobility issues or groceries, pets, and large items stranded. With more than 1,300 units between the two buildings and elevator space capped, fights started to break out between residents. Luke said it wasn't uncommon for 9 people to squeeze into a lift that had been reserved for 3. Incidents around the elevator could quickly turn physically aggressive, and multiple people were involved in altercations over asking people to enforce social distancing, she said. I didn't invite my family to view the unit out of fear for an elevator incident, which was likely to happen. The one time my dad did come to the unit to help me move, a full-grown man called me ugly for asking him to wait for the next elevator. That was embarrassing. My poor dad had no clue how to react. Elevator issues have become painfully common in Toronto condo and office buildings over the past decade, but ICE residents have additional, scarier problems to deal with. Chiefly, transient guests and violent crime. There were more Airbnb residents showing up than there were actual building residents, said Lukes, echoing a common complaint among people living in the area. The building was constantly catering to Airbnb guests versus the actual residents. My roommate had a drink thrown at her once over asking a young group of Airbnb guests to wait for the next elevator. The result was them piling 6 people into the elevator, pushing her out, and throwing a drink as she walked towards the concierge desk to report the incident. And, I mean, for goodness sakes, like, this sort of situation, if you ask me, like, first of all, you're seeing the reason why Airbnb generally is a bad idea. I don't really understand, from any perspective, why things like Airbnb are tolerated. That, we have, like, rules for hotels. Like, hotels have to follow rules. But suddenly, if it's an Airbnb, no, you don't need to do that. And what Airbnb is turning into is the kind of a nouveau version of boarding rooms, right? During the Great Depression, there were boarding rooms. A person could go, as they were traveling across the country looking for work, they would go and live in a room in one of these boarding houses. It was understood that you weren't going to stay there for very long, that it was transient, that you were just moving through. And all of the problems that were indicative of that system are indicative of the Airbnb system, which, again, I don't really understand why it's permitted or tolerated to exist. Why is it that in the midst of a housing crisis, no less, in the midst of a housing crisis, our housing is being used for wealthy people to gallivant in and out of the city, when there are hotels, right? There's a hotel industry that exists here. And honestly, this kind of thing is yet another, these buildings should be nationalized. They should be handed over to the state, and they should be controlled by a crown corporation, because clearly what's happening with your elevators and your garbage chutes, right, is that the slumlord, the guy that owns the building, is completely disinterested in spending the money to actually resolve the issues, to resolve the complaints that are in front of him. And chances are good, because he's a slumlord, because he owns the building, he probably has sway with the politician in the area, right? And that politician is probably unlikely to actually enforce the laws that exist to force him to actually change this. That's what I would like to see. What's the connection between the slumlord and the city councilor? What is their connection? Why are these elevators not getting fixed? Why is this stuff not happening? Well, and the systemic reason, the economic reason is obvious, right? Why would a slumlord want to repair anything ever? That's just money out of his pocket for no reason whatsoever. He doesn't give a fuck if the elevator's not working. He doesn't give a fuck if there's garbage all over the place. He doesn't give a fuck if the chutes aren't functioning. He doesn't care at all. You're giving him $2,600 a month to live in this place, right? He doesn't give a fuck about you at all. And then on top of that, it turns out that most of the building is just being converted into Airbnb. And again, the slumlord doesn't need to adhere to any laws or rules surrounding hotels for whatever reason. So again, we're just looking at a situation where neoliberal capital is completely failing the society yet again. That the idea that, oh, well, the free market will decide and all of this. Well, yeah, the free market will decide. And when the free market decides, it turns everything into essentially a shithole. And what's hilarious to me, and I'm seeing it more and more, so other societies, have laws and rules and adhere to those laws and rules. And when they do that, they're called authoritarian. This is what I'm beginning to see. That Westerners report on laws being enforced in places like Vietnam or China or even Russia, and then they say, oh, the authoritarian state. And near as I can tell, this is a statement that's made of nations that have laws and enforce them. How authoritarian, right? We're so used to living in this business we call a society that has no laws, and the laws we do have aren't enforced for the wealthy. We're so used to that, and that's become so normal that to see anybody actually enforce their rules, oh, so authoritarian. So authoritarian. And meanwhile, I'm standing here being like, take the building away from the slumlord. Straight up. Create a crown corporation. Take the slumlord's keys. Take his deed. Don't give him any fucking money for it. Say, you had your chance. Get the fuck out of here. You got your money. Go away. And then stop renting it out to Airbnb. Mandate that the elevator and the chute be fixed, and actually start renting this place out to people and reduce the cost, for God's sakes. $2,600? Are you kidding me? Get the fuck out of here with that. Get the fuck out of here. It's blistering to me that people are tolerating this shit. It's blistering to me that there's obviously the society is in a state of decay. There's these notorious slumlord buildings in downtown Toronto, and everybody's just like, yeah, what are you going to do? Well, what are you going to do? Fucking take it away from the slumlords, rent it out to Torontonians, drop the rent significantly, and just fucking mandate this shit. Fuck your free market principles. Fuck your, market... what the fuck is that? How embarrassing can you get?
July.
Ugh. And it ties in completely with this idea that, like, oh, we've got fucking oil wells here, abandoned oil wells, that are blowing up, right? Most Toronto housing buildings are in disrepair and have crime problems. I'm for Crown housing as long as it's fully funded. Yeah. Well, and this is the thing. Like, throughout the 60s and 70s, we had this shit. Like, we had this shit. It worked just fine, right? And it worked just fine for the reasons you would expect, right? You're paying people to actually do this job, and they do the job. Because most people actually want to do a good job when they're told to do the good job, right? And steadily over the 80s and 90s, all of that funding has been cut. And so, yeah, of course these systems aren't going to work if you cut the funding, right? As neoliberal capitalism comes through and decimates the society, all the public housing is gone. Yep, of course, by design, right? By design. And it's just gotten scooped up by billionaires, right? By the wealthy, by these slumlords who aren't interested in actually providing the service, because providing the service would actually cost money, right? And if you can monopolize, like, a skyscraper, right? Like, a skyscraper is like a city block, and it's like an enormous amount of housing. It's an enormous amount of housing. And if you can monopolize that, you know, and especially if you can get a city councilor in your pocket, which is obviously, like, to maintain this kind of shit, like, you're telling me there aren't, like, major police investigations happening in these buildings? You're telling me that no one in the police force is being like, hey, I bet that slumlord is tied to organized crime in some manner, right? Like, you're telling me that these Airbnbs are not a cover for some kind of organized crime, while there are literally, like, people shooting guns and shit around this area, right? Yeah. You're telling me there's not some kind of major police investigation, and that a city councilor is just, like, suppressing it or putting it off to the side. Like, I think you're totally, like, deluded. But I'm showing, like, the amount of conversations. Speaking of deluded, man, like, over the last couple of days, the amount of conversations that I'm having with people who are, like, bury their head in the sand about Aaron O'Toole's, like, overt white supremacy is pretty stunning. Like, I'm pretty stunned by it. Like, Canada First is a well-known white supremacist slogan, right? It's a Ku Klux Klan slogan, for God's sakes. We have pictures of the Ku Klux Klan walking around with signs that say America First. We've got, like, David Duke on footage saying America First. There is a white supremacist organization functioning in Canada called Canada First, with the explicit goal to infect the Conservative Party and ultimately take it over. And the leader of that party is walking around saying Canada First. Like, the idea that this is not a white supremacist connection is laughable. It's just easy to discard, and yet I'm having continuous conversations with people who are contorting themselves into all kinds of weird arguments to delude and convince themselves that, like, oh no, Aaron O'Toole walking around saying a well-known Ku Klux Klan slogan is normal. Hey Ruth, how you doing? They actually built an apartment house for single persons making less than $20,000, but nothing else since. Most of the first renters are still there. Well, yeah, like, the like, people want stability and people want housing. Like, I don't understand. Like, our society is so off the rails. Like, we're so outside of anything that should be considered normal that one of the great, like, there's this concept called, like, normalization, right? That certain things, certain societies see things as normal and other societies don't see as normal, right? That, like, what one society might consider normal, the other society might consider abhorrent, right? And that the goal of the neoliberal capitalists has been to normalize wage slavery and to normalize consumerism, right? Got a great video coming up later on when I need to take a break that I'll play about consumerism. And to normalize this idea of this incredibly destructive system that it has to be considered normal. And they start to infect us with all of that at a very young age. Part of the whole education system process. is to normalize this idea that you're supposed to spend the majority of your life behind a desk, working for people you don't know, on tasks that are pointless, towards goals that don't mean anything, and the reward you get, you're supposed to be pleased with, right? Oh, I got an A, hooray, like, let's go celebrate this meaningless letter. Just like in the same way, like, oh, I got a raise, more fake dollars that don't matter, right? Like, we literally just, like, make it up, and we're supposed to be, like, over the moon about this, like, normalization of this weird, odd, self-destructive, competitive model that has everybody at each other's throats all the time. That all relationships in this society are relationships of convenience. That you can't actually have meaningful friendships, meaningful relationships, meaningful connections with people, because the system dismantles all of that. It's not possible to maintain long-lasting, meaningful friendships with people who are angry and exhausted and in a state of total despair. And so all relationships in this society are relationships of convenience. All relationships are just so that you can get something off your chest, or like, we're treating each other like each other's therapists. And there's no, if you have someone in your life that you consider a meaningful friend, then you're very fortunate and very lucky, and that's happening in spite of the system, not because of it. And this normalization of these alliances of convenience amongst the populace is having profound negative effects on us. And we need to start normalizing things like, hey, why is there a fucking slumlord in Toronto taking over skyscrapers? Like, we need to normalize thinking that that's stupid and wrong. That, like, maybe we should create crown corporations to take these places over and mandate that they be put into a decent state of repair. And, like, lower the rent. How about that? Once they stopped multifamily units for about 20 years here, it was a ghetto renting, because where else do you go? Yeah, exactly. POC, am I the only one who feels like am I the only one who feels like the area in a speeding train, or like they are in a speeding train headed to a cliff and no one is at the wheel? No, that's the thing, is that there is someone at the wheel, right? But it's like Joe Biden, right? It's just like this old dude who's like looking over the wheel, and he's like, we're heading in the right direction, we're going that way, yep, oh yeah. And if you come up to them with like information about like, hey, the train's gonna go off the cliff, they go like, nah man, don't worry about that, that's just a bunch of malarkey, right? That's some newfangled, I don't have any sympathy for these millennials, right? Like, gee, I feel as if we've already launched. Yeah, Ruth. I get that feeling too, man. I get that feeling too. God help us, the capitalist system is doing everything it can, eh? It's doing everything it can. That this election is like case in point, that the media is completely disinterested in actually covering anything coming out of the NDP, anything out of the, and like, you're getting issues like liberals look to push abortion as election wedge issue despite O'Toole like, this is what this election is turning into. That the liberals are, instead of actually offering anything, right, they're completely just turning this election into wedge issues so that they can shore up their base and their position, right? And hopefully get, the same group of people who have been incensed about this issue for forever, and they're looking down to the states and being like, oh, there's a bunch of stuff happening on abortion issues down in the states, so let's try and wedge that in here and all of this. And, I mean, for goodness sakes, the liberal platform finally got released. So the liberals declare an election, right? The liberals declare an election, don't release a platform until 2 weeks into the election. The election's only 4 months long, so 50% of the way through the election, they finally release a platform. So I go through this. It's 86 pages, so I'm not gonna, like, tediously go through this and really, really bore you guys. But, like, it is very much exactly what you expect from liberals. It's incremental reformism, constantly reminding everybody about, like, oh, here's the things that we did, pat ourselves on the back, while completely ignoring. Like, my favorite was when they were like, hey, remember, we passed the CERB. And I'm like, yeah, and then you promptly worked to dismantle it. So, like, why are we talking about the CERB here, liberals? But, like, and constantly, right? A re-elected liberal government will improve the quality and availability of long-term care homes and beds, implement strict infection prevention and control measures, develop a long-term care act collaboratively to ensure that seniors are guaranteed the care they deserve no matter where they live. So it's pages and pages and pages of this kind of tripe, this kind of just absolute garbage of, like, we're gonna make it better, not really stating how to do it, really, and ultimately it's just reformism. It doesn't confront capital. It doesn't actually say to the capitalists, hey, you're worthless. What you've been doing is unacceptable. We're going to take this away from you, right? And because the liberals are there, again and again, I've got to remind everybody, the liberals are there to protect capital. That's what they're there to do. That when the populace goes and takes a look at something, like, let's say a slumlord owns a housing unit or something, the liberals go, oh yes, I see that is a problem. Well, instead of removing the capitalists and getting rid of them, because they're the ones running this place, and of course they're capitalists, so they're running it into the ground for their own personal benefit, instead of that, we will say that we're going to improve it by 5% over 4 years, right? So you're still paying the capitalists, you're still doing all the work, you're still doing everything while the capitalists get all the benefit, but it's going to be incrementally better by 5% over 4 years, right? And as long as you keep falling for this grift, right? And again, so here's a great example: support for teachers. A re-elected liberal government will increase the refundable tax credit to 25% from 15%, expand eligibility criteria to include tech devices, and ensure that teaching supplies purchased to perform employment duties are eligible, no matter what they may be. So no commentary whatsoever about the idea that, like, teachers buying their own school supplies is a problem. No, instead, we're going to make it slightly easier by 10% for teachers to buy more school supplies that should be provided in the first place, that should be supported through increased funding for education. But nope, gotta keep spending money on cops, right? Gotta keep spending money on cops, and it's just completely like this. And of course, what's missing from this? Anything revolving around a basic income. They don't give a shit about that at all. No promises regarding on how to help the disabled. They've got a one-pager down here where they're talking about disabled people, but they make no promises. Literally, they're just like, we're going to reduce poverty. It's like, great. Like you haven't been saying that the whole fucking time. But and I take a look at this, and I genuinely see a liberal government that is capitulating. That the Trudeau government is well aware that they have two options, right, moving forward. Option one, tax the wealthy, right? Because you can't create, like, you can't spend a bunch of money without balancing it out through taxation, right? Tax away worthless money. That's one way of doing it. The other way to do it is austerity, right? So you got to pick the rich or you got to pick the populace. You got to go against the capitalists or you got to go against the workers. This is one of these moments, and this election is indicative of this, where the ruling class, the politicians in power, have to pick a side. Because if you don't pick a side in this particular case and you just keep spending, well, that's going to inflate your whole economy and inflate your whole currency, and that's going to cause huge problems for everybody. So you have to do it. And of course, if you're rational, right, and if you actually care about your society, you're going to take a look at the giant pools of money that are sitting in offshore accounts doing absolutely nothing. Look at these worthless capitalists who are slumlords and fucking thieves. And you're going to say, yeah, we're just going to tax that wealth away, right? That's the NDP solution. The conservative solution is austerity. But here's the thing. The liberals don't want to pick. right? They don't want to pick. So I think they're intentionally throwing this. I think that they are going to take the knee, and with the intention completely of swinging the ball over to the Conservatives so that the Conservatives can be the bad guys, as they always are. We'll get 4 years of major austerity, and an angry and galvanized populace will then swing back into the Liberals, who will then, again, just run a smooth, just incremental reformist campaign, right? And of course, if you actually track this throughout the neoliberal period, it literally is the Liberals come in, take 1 step forward, the Conservatives come in and take 3 steps back, right? And so our society is actually regressing very badly. And capitalism is putting us into a situation where we are heading towards a neo-feudal state. And if we vote conservative this time around, that's where we're gonna land. Hold on 1 second, guys. My dog is like losing his little mind. You losing your little mind, buddy? Yeah, some peanut butter, eh? Yeah, you want some peanut butter, buddy. I can respect that. I can respect that, my little guy. Here you go. Here you go, buddy. Here you go. It's the first cool day in a long time, so my pug is just finally like, oh my god, I'm alive again. When it's hot, he's just like, he's got these little tiny sinuses, and so when it's hot, he just sits and goes, and finally it's kind of cool. It's 19 degrees, and so he's like, I'm alive! I can live, I can move, I can do things. Yeah. And Mark, how you doing, Mark? Good to see you. Half the passengers deny that the train is headed off the cliff. Exactly. Half the passengers. Well, and that's not exactly accurate here in Canada, Mark. It is 35%. So 33% of the society denies the train is headed off the cliff. Another 30% says, okay, we're heading off the cliff, but we can just steadily slow down, right? That, if instead of going 100 kilometers an hour off the cliff, we go 98 kilometers an hour off the cliff, that'll be better, right? That's the situation we find ourselves in here in Canada. To be specific. I wonder if women will leave Texas now that abortion is illegal. There was something that I saw, I don't think I saved it, which is a shame, because it pointed out that in terms of body autonomy issues, it is illegal to take organs from a corpse and use them for medical purposes unless you have the express permission of the person beforehand. So what this means now is that in these states that are mandating abortion and all of that throughout the United States, it means that the dead now have more rights than women. That in terms of body autonomy, women have less rights than the dead. You can register to vote by mail. I mailed my ballot in yesterday, applied for it last week. If anyone is scared to vote in public, yeah, that's a great service announcement there, bud. You can register to vote by mail. Probably just you could probably just Google it. Like, here, let's all go on a magical journey. Vote by mail, Canada. Right, apply to vote by mail from Elections Canada. Easy to find. Vote by mail, Canada. Right, click and deadline. What is the deadline? So the deadline, if you apply online from outside your riding on Tuesday, September 14th. Yeah, so we got plenty of time if that's the way you want to roll to vote by mail. It's easy to do. We've got a fellow here in chat, Pissed Off Canadian, letting us know he's already gone through the process. Very straightforward, very simple. One of the things that I'm so grateful for living here in Canada is that we have a fairly robust and well-protected third-party organization called Elections Canada, whose entire job is to maintain the integrity of our election system. And because of that, it's very difficult for politicians to mess with, and it's very difficult. And like, I hear some of the horror stories that you have to go through in the States, where you have to have like huge identification, all this, that, and the other thing. And like here in Canada, you can walk in, if you and a friend walk in to a voting booth area to vote, and your friend has like a bill or something, right? And like a bill even on their phone, and they show it. And so they like find your name, they check you off, all that kind of stuff, so your friend can go vote. And if your friend turns to you and says, oh yeah, that's Jim whoever, right? He lives at this address, I vouch for him. That's good enough, right? Like literally, you could just vouch for people. Like it's incredibly easy to vote, and the system is built to help people vote, that they want people to be voting. Just to up NDP and cons when next election? It may not be the same this time. Before, people had no time to pay attention. Now they are. Press Progress is asking for info on crooked donations, etc., like you were saying about cons and Nazis. They want to investigate. Well, I mean, they are investigating that particular one. The source that I've got about this kind of donations, I mean, it's them that's reporting on it. Nobody within the mainstream media or the corporate-run media is reporting on this kind of issue. And when I show this to people, they just it is like it's like nothing. Like it's nothing, right? Like people just kind of shrug about it. And they're just like, well, people have the right to advertise how they want and all this kind of stuff. It's like, okay, dude, like in civilized societies, right? Not like our society. In civilized societies, when you find out that that a party is donating to a literal cult, like there is no other way to describe Falun Gong but as a cult. There's just no other way to do it. And when you find out that people are like giving money, public money no less, to cults, that's you get thrown out of the party system, right? This actually happened in South Korea fairly recently, that someone got elected to be the president of Seoul or something like this. I don't know the exact, like, as you can tell, like it's happened a while ago. But it was found out that they were in bed with one of the cults that exists throughout South Korea, and they were forced to resign over it, right? So there's a civil society saying, hey, no, you don't get to be like part of a fucking cult that you were like hiding, right? And now here are conservatives, and also like Tom Kamek, Len Weber, Carrie Diotte, Michael Cooper, Stephanie Kusi, Kelly McCauley, James Cumming, and Zaid Abultaif, right, used public funds from their MP's office budget to place advertisements in the Epoch Times, which is owned by Falun Gong, which is a cult. Like, literally like a far-right, fascist, racial purity cult who believes that their leader can turn invisible, like this kind of crazy shit. They deny the existence of evolution, like that kind of stuff. The Epoch Times is like a QAnon. A New York Times investigation described the Epoch Times as a global-scale misinformation machine that has repeatedly pushed fringe narratives into the mainstream. And, like, nobody cares. Like, that's what's crazy about this particular story. Like, nobody cares. Like, I would think that that would be very concerning. Like, I think that this is more concerning than Justin Trudeau walking around with blackface, right? I think it's far more concerning that 8 conservative candidates use public money to place ads in a newspaper that spreads COVID-19 conspiracies and is owned by a literal cult. Like, that's far more concerning to me than like... So I just don't know how to break through on this. I don't know how to actually like convince anybody that this is important in the first place. I'm glad that they're asking for more help. How do I find that out? Here, press progress asking for help on crooked donations. Is that going to find it? Right, what? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. If you can tell me what to search on that, Ruth, and hopefully I can find the actual link to what you're talking about, because I would like to spread that around for sure. No iPhone Vuvuvuvu breathes air in capitalist society. Yeah, I love that this no iPhone Vuvuzuela has become a real meme where like, oh God, they don't have iPhones in Venezuela, right? And it's just like, the look at Venezuela grift has is gone. Like, I don't see any conservatives actually bringing up Venezuela anymore because that's been so thoroughly discredited. Like, you've literally got the UN saying straight out that the problems that Venezuela is facing is because of the U.S. sanctions. Like, what can you do? Like, what can you do? So, worth pointing out, COVID update. Yesterday we were down 500 cases. We spiked right back up to 800 cases, 865. We will be cresting up into 1,000 soon. I've been reading articles that because of the Delta variant, our medical professionals are convinced that we are heading into a massive fourth wave, one that's probably going to dwarf the previous waves. And of course, people are losing their minds right now throughout the media because Joe Rogan got diagnosed with COVID and took that, ivermectin or whatever the fuck it's called, the horse medication everyone's making fun of. It's become like the disgraceful position that people find themselves in. Tudes. I love this name, Tudes. I don't think I've ever seen you here, but good to see you. The article on Press Progress is called "We're Investigating Extreme Candidates for Public Office." We're investigating extreme candidates for public office. Press Progress. Here you go. Click. 10 hours ago. So, also hi. To you as well. Thank you so much for the information. I appreciate it. Good to see you. We're investigating extreme candidates for public office. Here's how you can share tips with Press Progress. Help us make sure Canadians are informed about those who want power and pass laws. Canada is having a federal election. Hey guys, did you know Canada's having a federal election? During this election, scrutinizing, especially given the disturbing number of people who've been radicalized by online conspiracies. Our past election has uncovered vetted candidates who have expressed controversial statements on race, associated themselves with QAnon, a group that's been identified by the FBI as a domestic terrorist threat. Wow, there's a key group behind the January 6th insurrection in Washington. Yeah. I'm absolutely bookmarked. Because I suspect that all of these are going to be really good sources that I can show people, and people will promptly ignore. Oh yeah, proud to be white, conservative candidate resigns. Well, that's good. Let's get more people resigning, please. Liked and shared by COVID-19 QAnon conspiracy theories. Yeah, fantastic. Ontario MPP Randy Hillier does not disavow QAnon after taking photos. Like, a well-known QAnon influencer dubbed the Q shaman has been arrested. Like, this guy's fucking crazy, man. Like, the Q shaman. Yeah, and this is what this makes me feel like a selling point to the conservatives. Yeah, exactly. Like, the Conservative Party is so off the rails that, like, and I feel like the media has done a very good job covering for the Conservatives and their overt connections to the same kind of crazy nonsense that's infected the Trump administration and infected the Republicans, right? That it's well understood now that QAnon and these sort of crazy right-wing conspiracy groups have taken over in America. But our media has done a really good job of suppressing and pretending like the conservatives are actually rational, right? Pretending like they're actually interested in governing, pretending like they're actually interested in this kind of stuff. And it doesn't take long to, like, go through Aaron O'Toole's Twitter, right? Aaron O'Toole's Twitter. Like, you can just go through his Twitter feed and you'll run into some kind of crazy right-wing conspiracy shit, like, almost immediately. Like, right now, because it's election season, it's a little bit different because he's trying to present himself as a rational person who's actually capable of, like, giving a shit about people. But you go down pretty, let's see, August 31st, so we're still in election season. Like, I've reported on some of the shit that Aaron O'Toole has put up, and some of it is insane, far-right conspiracy nonsense. Like, there was a video that Aaron O'Toole released where he literally accused Justin Trudeau of covering up a bioweapons program, a Chinese bioweapons program, right? Like, that's insane. Like, that's insane, crazed nonsense. And of course, within that, he's saying, and what's insane about all this, the Conservatives, like, this is very clear, straightforward messaging that I think lots of people, like, supporting Canadians with disabilities, doubling disability support in the Canada Workers Benefit from $713 to $1,500. That's a great policy. That's how you run a campaign, right? You take something that is easy to galvanize, is easy to get people to believe in, is easy to have people like that. This is objectively good, right? Like, objectively good, right? And of course, because Canadians are so gullible, right? Because they are so, like, in bed with the capitalist system and they're completely bought in, they don't understand that the Conservatives are holding this up as a shield, right? That as the Conservatives are going to war, their shield is, oh no, we're not bad, we're not evil. Like, this is like Darth Vader holding up a shield, right? Using, like, his force power to be, like, protect himself, right? Deflect oncoming threats and things like this. But his fucking lightsaber is austerity, and he's just gonna cut down rebel people and fucking cut people down while holding this fucking shield up, right? That's how the Conservatives are operating here, and it's effective. They're actually being very effective in this election with their PR teams are very impressive. I'm actually very impressed with the messaging that the Conservatives are using, and people really, 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 really underestimated these Conservatives going into this. Most of all the Liberals, right? Assuming that the Liberals are actually interested in running a campaign, which I argue they are not. Come on. When did that friggin' election get? How busy has O'Toole been? Oh my God. Anyway, I it's gonna take me a while to find this, but like, it's just insane nonsense, and you start seeing, like, he's walking around saying Canada first, walking around with these crazy QAnon conspiracy theories, like shit that you have to, like, literally go to, like, a QAnon convention to hear, and he's, like, saying it out loud in front of people. But disabled that can't work will be cut by Ford. What do you think Kenny and Ford are in hiding? Yeah, again, like, isn't it funny how, like, Conservatives are hiding away? Like, wouldn't you want to, like, take somebody who you think is a good leader and be like, look, Canada, this is the leader. This is who's in charge. Nope, not how the Conservatives roll. They want you to forget. Mr. Milo, are you about the peanut butter yet again? My dog is just, like, losing his little tiny mind. I know, the second I start talking, you think I'm talking to you. Because you don't really understand how the internet works. You don't really understand how the World Wide Web works, do you, buddy? What a nice life that must be, eh? Just like, my big concern is that I haven't had enough peanut butter today. What a life. What a life. O'Toole said residential schools were good for providing education. Yeah, exactly, right? Like, that kind of, like, overt, like, you either have to conclude of him when he makes those statements is that he's purposefully ignoring the absolutely damaging legacy. Like, the people who put in the residential school system were explicit. It was explicitly stated that the purpose of the residential school system was to kill the Indian, right? It was to solve the Indian problem. Is it a possibility that the Conservatives can win a majority? It is a possibility, for sure. They're close. They're only 26 ridings away, right? Of course, it's a possibility. It seems a bit unlikely. Most pundits and most people are kind of hedging on the idea that, like, I actually think what has happened here is that in a huff, in a tizzy, let's say, Canadians have blown off of the Liberals, and old white boomers, specifically men, and their sons, have kind of just like gotten into their cups and gone, oh, Trudeau, and well, I'm going to vote Conservative, right? Because you got to remember, like, these polls aren't somebody like going into a booth and checking a box and putting anything in and then a big count or anything. It's not an election. It's literally just like a dude on the phone, right? It's literally just like a dude on the phone, right? And the dude on the phone, like, is like, well, who are you intending on voting? I'm going to vote Conservative, right? It's just easy to believe that a frustrated and angry populace is blowing off of the Liberals and ending up exactly where they always do when they do that, which is in Conservative town. And what I am seeing with the polling data here, Canada polls, because it's all aggregate, right? But you can kind of see a cooling effect happening, right? You see this, like the Conservatives went up, right? And they crested right about here, right? And even while they were cresting here, there were other polls that were being done that had it kind of down in this area, right? So, because it's an aggregate, right? So they crested up, and now they're kind of cooling back down a little bit, right? You can even see that in the aggregate line, that it went up and it kind of has cooled down a little bit. Same story here with the Liberals. They started to plunge, and now they've kind of plateaued and they're cooling off. The NDP, on the other hand, right? You're seeing these here are outliers, right? Not enough to create a trend, unless we start to see more polls within that area, and then that is a trend. It is completely possible that the Conservative support swelled and then kind of crests, and then people kind of come to their senses, right? Or stop acting from a place of emotion strictly, start saying like, okay, let's take a look at these guys' policies, start remembering who the Conservatives are, start remembering what their policies actually are, right? Start actually talking amongst one another and start actually like trying to come to some conclusions. And it's easy for me to see that a good portion of those people will either swing back to Liberal or will swing over to NDP. That's completely possible. And what's really important to remember about the NDP, and did I keep that open, is that the NDP's strategy for this election is not to have like a general kind of thing. They've got a very targeted strategy, right? That their strategy for this election is not to win the election. Like of course they would love that. Like that would be great. But right now they're basically a shoo-in for 36 seats, which is an increase in 11 seats. So a success for Jagmeet Singh, right? Means that he won't have a leadership convention on his hands, means that he'll carry through, which is good for a party and is good for him as he's steadily building his base. So what the NDP strategy is very targeted, specific ridings, focusing on the ridings that they think they can win, focusing on the ridings that where the races are close, right? And so this kind of manifests itself into the general support, right? That this aggregate number is not so high for the NDP, but the NDP strategy right now is to focus in on one riding and win a couple of extra seats. Like if the NDP from this position can get into the 40s, they can get 40 seats instead of 36 seats, that's a huge success for the NDP in this particular election. That's a huge, huge success. The debates are really going to matter. I'm watching the French debate to see if there's a difference between the two. There will be. And the debates will matter more than ever. The debates are really going to matter this time around. The polls are reliable. The polls are reliable. They only call landlines. They're missing the youth vote. I've been helping my nephews and their friends register for mail-in voting since there will be no on-campus voting. Yeah, but the campus voting is gonna matter. I actually generally think that polls are fairly reliable. But they're reliable. They're not reliable in the way that people want to think about polls, right? When people think about polls, they think about them in predictive ways, right? That, this is a predictive of what will happen, right? That's how people generally think about polls. And it's literally not. It's exactly the opposite. That polls are actually regressive. That the data that we have is actually what people were thinking before, right? And so it's just a way to kind of track not where people are going, but where people have been. And more or less within a certain margin of error, right? Which is about 2%, 3%. Polls are actually fairly accurate. And the reality is if they weren't, like if they were always wildly off the mark, nobody would listen to them. Nobody would pay any attention to them. The trick with polls is that they can only track what they're being told, right? And one of the things, so exactly what I've said here is that the Liberals fell for a trap, that they thought they were looking at the polls as predictive, right? That Canadians were saying, you know what, if an election happened, I would be fine with it, right? I would be fine with it. But that's just what they were saying before, right? Like, that doesn't predict anything. That's just what these pollers are being told, right? But that's not much different than when, like, your angry girlfriend says, no, I'm fine. Like, I'm fine. Right? Oh, okay, so let's move forward as if she's fine. When, like, yeah, right. That's obviously not what the case is. And then the Trudeau Liberals call the election, and suddenly Canadians are mad about it. Right? Suddenly Canadians are like, oh, we're so angry at you, Trudeau. So, and I think it's because the Trudeau Liberals looked at the polls and they thought that they would be predictive instead of understanding that polls are not predictive. Polls they're just a measure of what has happened or what has been talked about, right? That's what's so interesting about polls. And here in Canada, polls change dramatically. I mean, like, for God's sakes, like, already this election has been fairly volatile, right? Like, this is fairly volatile in like a 1 week, 2 week period to have this happen. And it can go back down. And we've seen elections where so we have seen in Canada elections where, like, the NDP are like this, or like this would be the Liberal position and this would be the NDP position, and then about a week out from the election they flip, right? We've definitely seen that. We've seen that for sure. I'm watching the French. It looked bad at an NDP event with Indigenous leaders, and they endorsed Liberal candidates at the NDP event. Yep. Yes, that did look bad. I think that came down to just strictly a lack of organization within the NDP. I think one of the things that we are seeing from the NDP, and it's not a flaw. It's not bad. It's just the truth, is that the NDP are really struggling on a basic organization position. That they don't really have a strong boots on the ground organization that's actually connecting, right? And so they, like, invite these Indigenous people, but nobody actually talks to them and says, like, so you're going to be endorsing us, right? Like, nobody actually shores that up. That it's likely just an assumption. Yeah, the leaders were quick to denounce Nikki Ashton, which is a shame. I like Nikki Ashton. I think that Nikki Ashton in like a Star Trek sort of future, right? In a future where we've finally gotten over the women in politics sort of stuff, I think Nikki Ashton would make a fine leader. Like, I really like Nick. Every time I've heard her talk, the issues that she's focused on, the legislation that she focuses on, anytime she gets to speak in the House, I really like her. And I think she's strong. I think she's powerful. And again, I don't shy away from saying this kind of stuff, guys. And I'm not saying it because I'm happy about it. I'm saying it because I think it's real and I think it's true. If Nikki Ashton was a white man, she'd be killing it. She'd be killing it. People would love her, right? Like, I think that a lot of the critiques I hear of Nikki Ashton really revolve around the fact that she's a woman. Like, oh, she's kind of whiny. Oh, she's kind of a bitch. Like, all of these kind of stuff. Yeah, and if she was a man, people would say, wow, he's really committed, right? Oh man, he's determined, right? But that's not how our society thinks about these things. Ugh. Maybe I should move to another country. People still use that. They're still like, why don't you just move? I'm like, yeah, maybe I should. Maybe I should. So, speaking of other countries, here's a great series of graphs. I love maps. I love graphs. It is correlation is not causation, but it is important to point out hospitalizations per million population. The red, of course, is 400 plus. The dark blue and then down to lighter blue is easier. So we're seeing where the most amount of hospitalizations per million people is. We move down, people living in poverty areas by state. This is in 2010. The darker blue, of course. So most hospitalizations, also the poorest. With the exception, of course, with Florida, what with their retirees. Lynchings of the last 10 years, between 1909 and 1918, right? Executions of black defendants from 1972 to 2020, right? 2013 diagnosed diabetes prevalence. Lots of diabetes in this area here. Status of state Medicaid expansion decisions. Orange means not adopting. So, really, Missouri and Alabama and, Georgia are the places that are really taking. High school graduates, if you've got the brownish sort of color, that's the lowest scale, and the yellow is the next. Non-payers by state. Opportunity, right? Corporal punishment, right? Over and over again. And what we really are seeing, and I'm not saying this to try and humiliate anybody from this area or to humiliate any of this kind of stuff, because I've been thinking a lot about the southern states recently, especially as they're going through this complete and total catastrophe. This is a complete catastrophe that's happening throughout the southern states. It's a total disaster. It might as well be a plague, right? And I start to think, because I think about these things historically, right? And the Civil War is actually something that the southern states never really recovered from. That before the Civil War, it's somewhat misunderstood what was happening in the southern states during that period of time. That the southern states in many ways were structured like a feudal economy. That the people who were in charge were essentially feudal lords, right? That they lived on plantations, had slaves, right? It's a very similar structure to the way a feudal society works. Whereas in the North, they had a more democratic system of economy. Still a wage slave society, but a step up from chattel slavery, certainly. And so when the war happened, after the war, there was no system of economic growth put into the southern states. That there was no revitalization effort, right? That there was no attempt to create the egalitarian connection. That literally the war ended and they just said, okay, off we go, right? And you guys are now part of our system, and here we go. And that is having major reverberations throughout the region to this day. That in many ways, the southern states are simply left behind and simply told, okay, now you got to deal with it. And the impact of it that it's having is completely devastating for the society and the building of a civil society, and has manifested itself now in the modern period with this, what can only be described as a completely self-inflicted wound, right? That everybody else on the entire planet is saying, put the mask on, get the vaccine. Everybody else is doing this. It is this region right here that is special in that they refuse to get the vaccine, and they see wearing a mask as an infringement on their rights. And part of it is 100% because of this history between the southern states and the federal government of the United States of America. That the southern states have never actually been integrated truly into the larger, wider economy in meaningful ways. Yeah, Reconstruction was a total failure. Yeah, I think that that's accurate. And especially with the decimation of any kind of manufacturing centers or any kind of real efforts to improve the economic quality of life for people in these regions. So you do have a people who, by and large, have been economically abandoned by their own country, and then the country rolls in and demands that things be done. And the initial impulse, and the impulse that's certainly carrying the day, from these Southerners is, go fuck yourself. How dare you come into my area and tell me what to do after you've abandoned me and fucked off and all this kind of stuff. And I don't even think this COVID thing is real. You lot have been lying to us all along. Why should we believe you now? And I mean, while people make fun of them, and they're certainly paying a heavy cost, for it, but while people are making fun of them, I'm actually quite sympathetic to their plight, because, well, why should they believe anything they're being told? Give me one reason. Give me one reason why they should believe any of this shit. They've been lied to over and 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 over again, right? And especially in this, like, period of time, like, who do you think is going to these wars, right? Who do you think is going to Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and Syria and all of these places? Like, who do you think, right? Poor Southerners. Like, who are the gun nuts in the society? Who are the guys that are most likely to militarize? Who are the guys that are most likely to try to find their way into the military because they have no other thing going on? It's these Southerners. I bet you if you found a map that said enrollment in the military, that it would look a lot like this, right? That it would look a lot like this. And you got a lot of these Southerners that are going over there and seeing what's real and coming back and being like, dude, we are being completely lied to about every aspect of this. And now they're being told, oh, we have a serious crisis here that we have to do something about. And they're just going, no, fuck that. I bet Bill Gates is putting nanobots in there, right? Here we got some hard facts coming out. The refusal to accept the Medicaid expansion was just insane. It's free money from the federal government to pay for poor people's health care. But if you pay for poor people's health care, they won't enroll in the military. Right? The Confederate dollar was... so Mocked has got some spitting facts. The Confederate dollar was backed by cotton. That's right. Which you can all learn about in the wonderful book, Cotton is King. I highly advise that everybody find the audiobook, find the thing, Cotton is King. Skip the chapters where they list like all the economic stuff, because that's boring. But very, very fascinating book, Cotton is King. It's a book that it's a series of essays written by the Confederates on the pro-slavery side of the argument. That they made arguments for why slavery was just and good and why we need it, right? And if you read Cotton is King, I think we should be having grade 10ers read Cotton is King and be going through it, because the arguments that exist within Cotton is King are the same ones that are being used today, that they haven't really evolved. And the only reason people are letting it happen is because people don't understand that this book exists in the first place. It's one of the most important books that comes out of the Civil War period in my viewpoint. The Confederate dollar was backed by cotton, was vulnerable to inflections, and monopoly. Slavery was an inefficient system because you had to pay for food, clothing, tools, 24-hour security, which you might not make up for in income. Since the South was wrapped up in a semi-feudal, agriculturally dependent economy, they refused to innovate past agricultural, while the North, since it was industrializing, invented the first modern lock-stitch sewing machine. And due to this lack of innovation, they declined as a region and later a nation. Spitting facts, Mocked. Spitting facts. I love it. And like something like the Civil War doesn't just go away, right? Like that kind of conflict gets embedded in cultures, right? And it's not like the North and the South have like made great pains to unify, really, right? It's not like they've made like great pains to try and equalize. And if anything, you can see that throughout American culture. How are Southerners depicted in culture, right? And moreover, when people go down and they do like reality TV shows, like we all remember Honey Boo Boo and all that shit, right? Well, the people who are going through this are depicted as kind of lunatics and loonies. If unfortunately you can't put links, I can search up anything you need, bud. Just tell me what to search, and I'll try and find it, okay? But like, the southern states are always depicted as like ass backward hicks and all this, whereas like, I feel like if you just accept that what you're looking at is a different culture, is a different place where there are different people, it's actually quite charming, right? Like, the southern states are always depicted as like dangerous, like incestuous, inbred, illiterate, all of that kind of stuff. And like, if you lived in Louisiana and you lived in Alabama and you watch some of these Hollywood movies, yeah, you're going to be insulted. You're going to be absolutely deeply insulted by the depiction that's coming out of your people. Whereas, like, and sure, like, I'm sure that those people exist in the society, just like, you could find like a skeezy rapist in Hollywood, right? But again, it comes down to like, you never actually see a depiction of a Southerner in American media that is like even just a normal dude, even just a regular guy. Texans have kind of broken through a little bit, right? Like Hank Hill, Matthew McConaughey, like these sorts of figures have broken through a little bit, where, they're just kind of like normal dudes who are trying their best. But, like, Alabama? Okay, a quote from Lucerdo. Slavery in its most radical form triumphed in the golden age of liberalism and at the heart of the liberal world. In all its radicalism, the paradox we face consists in this: the rise of liberalism and the spread of racial chattel slavery are the product of a twin birth. Ooh. That's a spicy tweet. That's a spicy quote, dude. That's a spicy quote. There's a lot in there. There's a lot in there. And there's truth to that, right? Well, because liberalism was only really extended to white property owners, really. That, like, ultimately, it's all well and good if, like, white property owners look at each other and say, like, no, we want to live in a liberal society where everyone is egalitarian as long as you're white and you own property, right? And at the same time that they're doing that kind of liberal talk within themselves as, white property owners, they're literally going and enslaving people. And it's classic liberalism, right? It's like this veneer of civility. It's this veneer of pretending as though you live in a civil society, and pretending as though all men are created equal, except the blacks and the Jews and the Poles, right? Like every statement has like this heavy asterisk beside it at all times, and because the United States system was not set up to easily reform itself, right? That the United States governmental system, the federal system, was literally set up to prevent reform. That's the purpose. That it wasn't set up to make reform easy. And especially with the introduction of senators and then the elected senators, it became even easier to prevent reform. And so you end up with a system that at the end of the day really, really works for white landowners, right? If you're a white landowner living in America today, right? Well, you're not gonna let the system reform itself so that regular citizens can also be landowners, or non-whites can be landowners. Like, that's not going to happen. right? And because you're the one with all the money, right? You can buy the senators and buy the Congress people that you need in order to keep it that way. Like, this period of time, like the last 20 years in American politics, has been explicitly obstructionist. Like, the Republican Congress under Obama literally said, just say no. That was their policy with the Obama administration, just say no. So it was obstructionist explicitly. The Tea Party movement, again, was another obstructionist movement. And because the system is designed to be obstructed. That's how it's designed to be. And so for the Americans to actually get anything done in their system requires mass mobilization of the populace. There's no other way to do anything in the States, right? That it isn't until the people who hold power are scared of a mass mobilized populace that they will actually do anything. And that's evidenced over and over again in American politics. I always thought it was funny how Americans say that the Founding Fathers compromised on the issue of chattel slavery, but they refused to compromise on the issue of independence from England. Yeah. To any modern person, compromising on the issue of chattel slavery is monstrous, whereas being a British colony is not considered that bad. Yeah. No, people have a lot of very strange, incoherent, inconsistent views, because that's people for you. Like, that's how people are. We're just strange and inconsistent. Like, I have literally had people say to me that the Soviets were evil because of the October Revolution, right? Oh, the October Revolution happened and that makes the Soviets evil. And I literally say to them, oh, so you're against the War of Independence then that happened in the United States. Basically the same exact event, right? That, like, a group of revolutionaries revolted from a monarch to set up a new society. It's the exact same system. Well, not only is capitalism full of contradictions, but humans are too, right? That's what makes this whole thing so spicy. That humans, like, there's a thing called cognitive dissonance, right? Where humans can hold two opposing viewpoints that contradict one another. And even on top of that, those contradictions can be pointed out to them, and people will just be like, oh, okay. Right? And they'll just accept that they contradict, and they won't care. They won't care that they won't make any attempt to kind of rectify those contradictions. They'll just continue moving forward with those contradictions in place. If you ask me, the greatest contradiction that exists within certainly American society is the contradiction that exists between capitalism and Christianity. That you have capitalists who consider themselves Christians, who are attempting to make a go of it, but it's completely impossible to do that, right? Because it creates an internal contradiction within the individual, and that contradiction is always between being a good capitalist, being a good Christian, and being a good person. And you can pick two of those things, but you can't ever have all three. You can never be a good capitalist who is also a good Christian, who is also a good person. It's just not in the cards. So you get to pick two. And the reality is that most people sort of pick and choose on the fly where they want to go based on kind of who's in the room, right? And who's seeing what you're doing, but also kind of just what's happened recently, right? Like if I have come out of church and an event happens, well, maybe I'll lean more on the Christian side of it. But if I've just come out of a business meeting and the same situation occurs, well, maybe I'll lean on the capitalist side of it. And people are are loaded with these kind of internal contradictions, and that's why I think it becomes important for especially leftists, especially as we move into this, let's be straight, as we move into this kind of more fascist period, it becomes important for us to be kind of light. And this is something I'm saying for myself as well, that I need to learn to be more light in my touch and more forgiving of of the people who are opposed to me, because they don't really think about these things. They're just going through their life. And if they do pause to think about these things and see the contradiction, many of them are just going to shrug and be like, oh, well, what are you going to do? And move on, right? Hey, Nick. Hey, I was just about to print out my flyers for the reading group I've made. How many do you think I should print out? Print 50. Yeah, print 50. Print 50. 50 is manageable. 50, you can put up 50. Hold on, what's your timeline? When are you actually putting this shit up? Like when is the date, I should say? All right, so it is 7:30. So I'm gonna play my song. Oh, this is exciting. There's a new person in the chat. I hope you're still here, bud. I forget your name. Tudes? Tudes? For some reason, I thought there was more to it than that. But so this is a song that I wrote a while back. I call it the Care Bear Stare Against Neoliberal Capitalism. I love playing it. It's probably the first song I ever made that I actually enjoy while I'm playing. And my feeling is that if everybody in the world started to sing this song, that there's absolutely nothing the capitalists could do about it. It's called Antarctica is Covered in Ice. Got asked a question by my niece who's 5 years old. What's the world gonna be like when I'm grown? I looked up at the crimson smoke-filled sky. I thought, what's the harm in telling one more lie? I said, everybody's safe, no one's sleeping in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? The burning sun won't leave a paper trail. Why work so hard if it's too big to fail? And what's the point of feeding this machine if it won't make the world in our dreams, where everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets? You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? And I know one day my maker I will meet, when death's sweet kiss comes and sweeps me off my feet. I hope by then we've learned a little more. I'd like to leave this place better than before, so everybody's safe, no one's sleeping in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice when everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat, and Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? And I believe that we can do it. Because the problems that we're facing are easy to solve. That we don't need to make some technology, we don't need to do something. Doing something is what's getting us in the problem, because we've gone to war with the earth, and it's a battle that we cannot win. The earth was a garden before we got here. It wants to be a garden. It will be a garden when we're gone. And all we have to do, if we want to witness one of the greatest miracles that will occur here on this planet, which is to see the earth heal itself, all we have to do is stop. Stop polluting. Deal with the problems that are faced, that are created from our cessation of pollution, which will be much, much easier to deal with than the problems we're creating by polluting. And when we do, and I believe that we can, and when we do, we will stand back in awe and bear witness to the absolute miracle that is the earth healing itself. And if we want to be here to see it, all we have to do is stop. It's so foolishly simple. After work on Friday, my first date is planned for September 9th, 50. Yeah, do 50. Go around, put them up. And of course, if you put up the 50 and you feel like you can do more, just print more. Oh, Loaf is asking if you have a way for people to join your group online. That's fun. Were you inspired by Phil Ox? He's my favorite radical musician. I don't know who that is, bud. Here we go. Phil Ox. American singer-songwriter. I'm not surprised that I don't know who this guy is. It's not like our media works really hard to remind people about the protest singers. If anything, our society does everything it can to co-opt those people. Like, remember when rap was actually like an articulation of societal rage? When it actually articulated a protest? Songs like Fuck the Police, that sort of thing, right? It's not going to let you put emails and links and stuff up, bud. Put a space between every letter. It'll go through then. So I'm going to take a brief break. Yeah, YouTube automatically, it removes comments and things like this. Oh, Love Me, I'm a Liberal. Yeah, I'm familiar with Love Me, I'm a Liberal. That's a fun one. So I'm going to quickly go take a quick break, refresh my water, go use the washroom, that sort of thing. Here's another great video from George Monbiot. I'm actually extremely jealous of this guy because he's essentially doing what I'm trying to do, but he's doing it so much better with such a great writing team, and friggin' he's British. So he sounds like friggin' David Attenborough while saying it. Can you imagine if I sounded like David Attenborough? I'd have the most popular channel on YouTube. This fucking guy. Anyway.
The dominant force in our lives is something we scarcely talk about as a force. It's called consumerism. Consumerism is the stifling of our moral imaginations. So we might go to the shop and we see some smoked salmon in a packet. And it's just this orange jelly-like stuff, which, oh, that looks nice, that looks tasty, all packaged nicely. And there might be a little thing at the top with the Scottish flag, some tartans or bagpipe to say, oh, this comes from Bonnie, Scotland, and it's all healthy and lovely there, and the air's clean. And so it creates a sort of backstory, but it's a backstory which bears almost no relation to what's actually going on. That here you've got these salmon in these cages in sea locks, being treated appallingly, in terrible conditions, literally falling apart, even as they're still alive, being eaten to death by sea lice, having these horrendous treatments given to them to try to stop the sea lice, being fed on what's basically ground up fish meal, which is harvested by these massive super trawlers, scooping up entire shoals of fish and the dolphins that are hunting those fish. And whenever a super trawler passes by, dead dolphins start washing up on the beaches. Because seals want to come and eat the salmon, the seals are shot, and orphaned pups then starve to death. And we have these whole sequence of horrendous things happening in order to deliver you this orange jelly-like substance in a packet. But we don't think about those things because our moral imaginations have been stifled by the fact that this thing has been completely removed, detached from its context. And then we don't think about the future either, about what happens to the packaging once we've thrown it away. Where is this place called away? There is no away. It's still on this planet. Something has to happen to that packaging. It might be burnt in an incinerator. It might be dumped in landfill. We don't think about what the impact might be on the people of future generations, on people who live far away from us. What we require in the 21st century, in the midst of our environmental emergency, is a whole new moral compass. But far from developing this whole new, richer moral sense, this dominant force in our lives, consumerism, shuts down even our existing morality, stifling our moral imagination. And how is it projected into our lives? How has this become so dominant, so effective? How has it effectively shunted out of our minds so much of what was there before and placed in our minds instead this object, this service, this thing you can buy? Well, to a large extent with the help of celebrities.
We're both Chance the Rapper. No, I get it.
A celebrity is the mask that the machine wears. Because if your corporation consists of a private equity company which is just really a filing cabinet in Panama City, no one's going to attach themselves to that. No one's going to think, oh yeah, I feel loyal to that corporation, I want to buy more of its products. That corporation needs a face. And the face is the celebrity that it uses in its adverts. The celebrity influencer on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok who says, hey look, I've just bought this amazing product. Hey, you could really benefit from this as well. Now there's long been an element of this. The Hollywood stars who promoted cigarettes, this has been going on for a long time. But now it's accelerated to the point that you can scarcely escape it. Almost every aspect of our life has been monetized. And what consumerism does is constantly to create new needs, constantly to create new wants which didn't exist before. And once we want that thing, well, our lives are incomplete until we've got it. On phones now, many of the phones have automatic beauty settings, which make you look more conventionally beautiful than you might consider yourself to be. They give you cheekbones, they slim you down. And then you look at the picture of the phone and you say, oh yeah, that's me. And then you see yourself in the mirror and say, oh, I'm hideous. I'm not the thing which I thought I was. I'm not the thing which is in that photo. So then you become insecure about yourself and you start to commodify yourself and say, I've got to buy these products. I've got to buy the makeup. I've got to buy the Botox, buy the plastic surgery, which turns me into this thing which my phone says I am. And then you're comparing yourself all the time to other people. Look at that beautiful celebrity who's so slender, who's so beautiful, who's so much more desirable than I am. And they might well have been enhanced also, either digitally or by cosmetic surgery. And so you have this arms race, this constant race against your own insecurity, which has been implanted into your mind by consumerism. And that too then shuts down your moral imagination. And it turns you into the detached object, removed from the past, removed from the future, removed from the world around you, where you become the consumable thing that is effectively being bought and sold, traded by the corporations who are selling stuff to you to make you look like the thing which you see on your phone when it's been digitally enhanced by the beauty settings. This thing, consumerism, which we're told enhances our lives, which makes us richer, which makes our lives better, actually destroys our peace of mind. It destroys our sense of self-worth. It destroys our sense of security. Now, there's been a lot of psychological research done on this, which shows that people who are most invested in celebrity culture, who read the celebrity magazines, who follow the celebrity gossip, the celebrity news, are on the whole much less connected to their own neighbours. The celebrity has effectively taken the place of their friend and neighbour in their minds. The fake neighbour has displaced the real neighbour. They're less likely to be involved in politics, they're less likely to vote, they're less likely to protest. Celebrity culture displaces so much of the rest of our moral world. And what it does is to weaponize consumerism. Even our dissent gets commodified. Even people who become heroes in the field of political dissent then get adopted by corporations and sell us that dissent. Our resistance becomes a consumable. Everything gets degraded by this relationship until it loses its meaning. It destroys our relationship to each other, because when we commodify ourselves, we commodify other people as well. We start to think, what can they do for me, rather than what's it like to be with them. We start to monetize our relationships, even our relationships to the natural world, this whole natural capital agenda which says, oh, we won't value things until we put a price on them. So a primrose has to have a price. An elephant has to have a price on it. Otherwise, it's not worth anything and we can't account it. Everything becomes a consumable as consumerism, driven by the demands of capitalism, extends into every aspect of our lives and the lives of those around us. It destroys our humanity. It destroys our place in society. It destroys our place in the present, in the past, in the future. It detaches us. It removes us. It objectifies us. It destroys our minds. I think one thing that the pandemic has taught a lot of us is that it's not enough just to have virtual relationships. It's not enough to exist as a consumer alone. We actually desperately need to reconnect with other people. We need to reconnect with the physical world, with the natural world once more. People are experiencing a real craving for that. So perhaps this is now a great moment to reassess who we are and where we stand, to reassess our relationships with each other and the rest of the living world, to overthrow consumerism, to reconnect, to rekindle our moral imaginations. Double Down News takes no adverts, it has no commercial sponsors. It depends entirely upon people supporting it through Patreon. So please help us to reconnect intellectually, morally, with the world around us by becoming a patron and supporting Double Down News through Patreon. Thank you.
Oh man, I don't know why, but that one really made me really quite tired. That we kind of finished up on that. I feel, whew. So I'm just going to acknowledge that and move on. And Tudes, yeah, hi, Ken Sinkos, how you doing? Demand Better, how you doing, bud? I watched your video, bud. Good work. Keep it up. Keep up the good work, bud. Keep up the good work. And let's do it, bud. Well, anything specific? Anything specific, Tudes, or just Philox generally? Yeah, we can get rid of that. And I gotta make sure that we're in Creative Commons, so hopefully... Yeah, unfortunately... This is the most annoying thing, dude, about YouTube, is that I can't stream anything that's not in the Creative Commons. And so the let's take a look here, though. Oh, this is gonna be fun. This is good.
I cried when they shot Tamir Rice. The tears ran down my smartphone. I raged at Breonna Taylor's murder as it played on the corporate news shows. But we need that big bounty on Assata. She's a criminal, everyone knows. So love me, love me, love me. I'm a liberal. I support those BLM marchers. Just don't be unfair to the cops. I'll take a knee with dear Colin, at least till the complaining stops. But I won't use the word abolition. Reform is good, defund is not. So love me, love me, love me. I'm a liberal. I cheered when Joe Biden won it. My faith in the system restored. Now life can just go back to normal. The empire's not evil anymore. And we'll acknowledge marginalized people as long as they don't move next door. So love me, love me, love me. I'm a liberal. I don't hate the South, they're just stupid. You can tell by their accents and ways. The workers, the black and the brown folks, if they'd all just vote Dem, they'd be safe. And if you tell me y'all is inclusive, I go into a white hot rage. So love me, love me, love me. I'm a liberal. I think that good healthcare is needed. It isn't just meant for rich snobs. Citizens all should afford it. And right now we're all getting robbed. Oh, but don't you dare say single payer. We'd lose all those insurance jobs. So love me, love me, love me. I'm a liberal. I read the New York Times and WAPO. I get my China news from BBC. I don't understand Breitbart readers, but Fox News can make sense to me. Oh, you poor fools getting news from Facebook. What's wrong? Don't you own a TV? Love me, love me, love me. I'm a liberal. I read D'Angelo and Kendi, so I know the right phrases and tact. I read Stokely, Kwame Ture. At this point I'm practically black, but I stop reading at reparations. I'm not giving my heritage back. So love me, love me, love me. I'm a liberal. Don't talk about Israel or Palestine. No, the very words give me a scare. They've got lots of terrorist problems, so the word apartheid isn't fair. But since we already moved the embassy, we might as well just leave it there. So love me, love me, love me. I'm a liberal.
This guy's sharp. This guy's sharp. I like this guy.
Once I was young and impulsive. I sought justice and action and clout. I went to all the socialist meetings, I fought hate from the left with no doubt, but now I've grown older and wiser, and that's why I'm ratting them out. So love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal. Yes, please love me, love me, love me, I'm a liberal.
What a great song. What a great song. Subscribe. Easy subscription, easy like. Don't send other people to other live streams, dudes. Come on, bud. Hey, Alex. Glad you're in here, bud. Came for the title, stayed for the music. Absolutely perfect, bud. I'm glad to hear it. I got you with Capitalism, eh? If you have the opportunity to listen to the original by Phil Ox, unfortunately I can't play it on the live stream or my live stream will get shut down. Absolutely wonderful. This guy does a great job of it. Wonderful dude. Go seek him out. He deserves more than 274 subscribers. Beautiful voice too. Love that high tenor. Okay. You're sucker for cheesy puns. You just missed it, Toy Store John. You just missed it. You're gonna have to go back in time. Going back in time. Boom, 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 ba da 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 ba da. Back in time. Ryerson University struggles to find unproblematic Canadian historical figure to change name to. From the Beaverton. The Beaverton always nails it, dude. The people who are working at the Beaverton, they are the most clever writers in Canada right now, for sure. Every single time, it's just absolutely nailing it. We really painted ourselves into a corner here, said Ryerson's president Mohammed Al-Akemi. There really are no decent historical figures that we could name our school after. John A. Macdonald tried to take voting rights away from Chinese Canadians. Lester B. Pearson recommended the partition of Palestine to create Israel. And Lord knows we can't call ourselves Drake University. Murderer who talks to ghosts, said board member Tiara Green as she scrolled through a Google image search of famous Canadians. Come on, dude. Do like Tommy Douglas. Yeah, Walking Eagle News is another really good one. Have a good one, too. It's good to see you, bud. Glad you popped in. Oh, God knows we all need a good laugh. God knows we need a good laugh. Here's a great tweet. I have taken to anytime I see a tweet or a message just out in the wild, a post that somebody puts up, that I can tell is genuine and from their heart. I try to highlight it and I try to really show it because what is happening in our society and the collapse of the neoliberal capitalist system is becoming more obvious, and it's becoming more obvious to regular normal citizens. It's no longer it's no longer crazy assholes like me on the far left who are just like insane artist types, right? Like it is like your bus drivers, just regular normal citizens living in the world. And when they come and they articulate what is in their heart, it can be really, really beautiful and really, really heartbreaking. And so here we have one. I don't think that I've got a name, unfortunately, so I can't attribute it to anybody. But they teach us that the three branches of government have power divided between them for the sake of a series of checks and balances to ensure that no one branch exercises totalitarian power. In reality, the three branches of government have power divided between them for the sake of a series of checks and balances against the citizenry being able to pass populist legislation. When you look at the structure of Congress, this should become obvious. The House sees population proportionate representation, whereas the Senate is an even 2 members per state. So it's a lot easier to buy 51 senators than it is to buy 218 House members. The Senate exists to kill any genuine populist legislation that might arise in the House. If M4A managed to pass the House or Senate, the Senate exists to kill it. Or the President can veto it, or the Supreme Court can declare it unconstitutional. Everybody who calls me an idealist has themselves been sold a false, idealized version of the current system. If you believe the America stands for truth and justice, you are an idealist. If you believe that American foreign intervention is waged for the good and benefit for those countries invaded, you are an idealist. If you believe in an America that is land of the free, home of the brave, you are an idealist. You literally believe in an ideal that is the total opposite of the reality. It seems that every time someone calls me a name, they're really just describing something inside their own psychology they're unwilling to grapple and come to grips with. We are sold an idealized version of capitalism that simply cannot exist. Why don't more of us see this? And the answer to that question is that our owners pay a lot. They pay a lot of money to make sure that we don't see this. There's a really interesting thing happening in Canada right now. Here in Canada, we don't have an elected Senate. We have an appointed Senate. That when a Senate seat comes up, it operates very similarly to how the American Supreme Court operates. That the Prime Minister picks people to sit on the Senate. And the argument has always been, well, it's an unelected Senate, so it's not beholden to the will of the populace and exists to suppress popular issues and popular legislation. But the opposite seems to actually be the case here in Canada. That the basic income, for example, our Senate has actually sent a letter to the House of Commons, to the Parliament, in support of a basic income, and has asked the Parliament to actually move forward with the basic income. So there is a piece of legislation that people would say is populist, right, or something that will help the population, but it's literally coming out of the Senate as a recommendation to the House. And then, of course, the Liberals are the ones that aren't moving forward with it because the Liberals are beholden not to the people, but to the corporate interests that own them. And so there is this kind of odd. I don't know what to think about our Canadian Senate anymore. Like, once somebody gets appointed for life, because it's a lifetime appointment, I know, buddy, the Senate. Absolutely. My dog, he hates parliamentary politics, dude. And anytime I get talking parliamentary politics, he loses his mind. But because the Senate is a lifetime appointment, it is almost as though the people who are appointed to it just sort of disconnect from the corporate domination. Like, you can't really bribe these guys anymore, right? That they exist in the Senate and you can't take it away from them. They have the position. And so why would they corrupt themselves? And why would they fall into that kind of pattern of corruption? Because they're not going to, like, do the thing that happens in the House where you retire from the House or you get unelected and then you go work for the corporate sector. They don't need to do that. They sit in the Senate. That's what they are. They are a senator. And so it's almost as though the lifetime appointment to the Senate has actually shifted the Senate towards actually working on behalf of the populace. It's very strange what's actually happened in Canada, and there's a lot of debate surrounding it. So, but when you see posts like this, I think the accuracy is absolutely, like, 51 senators. Like, how much money do you genuinely think it would cost somebody like David Koch, right, multi-billionaire? Like, how much money do you actually think it would take to bribe 51 senators? Like, it doesn't take that much money, right? Like, $1 million? Do you think you could just have somebody in your pocket for $1 million? Well, if you're a billionaire, that's only $51 million. That's nothing. What are your thoughts on UBI? I know Socialist Action mentioned that it's problematic. My feeling is that critics on the left of a basic income tend to criticize it in a theoretical kind of way. That their position is that it's, and they're not wrong, that it is a reform of the capitalist model. It is a method to ameliorate suffering within the populace while not addressing the structural issue of capital. That's absolutely the truth. My position on the basic income is very much that I see it as an emergency measure. I see it as a transitionary emergency measure that must be implemented. That even if we had a communist revolution going on and we were taking everything over and all of that, we would still need to be doing things like pass a basic income. We would still need to be focusing on these sorts of things. If not a basic income, certainly systems that mimic it and mimic the outcome. Because it's all well and good to stand on a cliffside and say, hey, we should put up a railing for people's safety. That's a fine thing to say, but if you have people hanging over the edge of the cliff, right? You don't talk about a rail. You talk about getting people up from the cliff that they're hanging on, right? That is how I view the basic income. I view it as a transitionary method. I also think it's an inevitability. It just depends on how much suffering the populace is willing to accept. Because eventually there comes a point where the capitalists are out of ideas. Right? That the capitalists will plunder the society as heavily as they possibly can, and gouge in as deep as they possibly can, and the backlash from that, the blowback from that, will be such that the capitalists will eventually shrug and go like, okay, well, let's do a basic income, because they will be out of ideas and they won't know what else to do. And so I suspect it will happen. The question is, how much suffering will the populace be willing to accept? And the populace is willing to accept a great deal of suffering. Like, the populace is definitely willing to accept a great deal of suffering, especially if it's somebody else's suffering, right? We've seen that throughout our society. You walk by a homeless person, you don't think to yourself, we've got to do something to get that guy homeless. People think to themselves, oh, well, I wonder what he did, right? I wonder what mistakes he made. I'm so glad I'm so much better than that homeless guy, right? Yeah, I'm for UBI as long as it doesn't replace social services like welfare. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's supplementary. And at this stage in the game, I've done enough research on the UBI to conclude that the passage of a basic income is actually cheaper than the negative outcomes of dealing with poverty, right? That when you actually, the food banks of Canada have done studies on this, in Ontario at least, and they've pegged the cost of poverty, right? And when you do the math on it, because the number that is in the House right now from the Parliamentary Budget Office of the cost of a basic income is $100 billion. And everybody goes, $100 billion? Oh my God! You know, forget about the fact that the Canadian economy is $8 trillion, right? So you're talking about like an economic impact of like 1%, right? Like literally, like it's such a small percentage in terms of actual spending in the economy that to like lose your mind about it's embarrassing, right? And of course, if you take $100 billion and you use it to build bombs that you drop on brown people overseas, nobody even bats an eye. But if you want to, feed people, that's, oh wow, that's so expensive. But but once you account for the fact that like shelters cost money, food banks cost money, emergency services like doctors and dentists cost money, social workers cost money, emergency police services cost money. The damage that it does to the society generally costs money. Putting in anti-homeless architecture costs money, right? Like all of these things, dealing with the negative consequences of poverty, all of that costs money. And when you do the calculations and you work it out, you find out that people are spending more to keep people homeless that would actually be cheaper to get them into a home and get them and give them food, right? Finland literally did this. It literally did this calculation. It was just like, oh, it's cheaper to house them, get them in the house, right? And they saved a bunch of money and they solved their homelessness problem, right? And the idea So now I'm 100% landed on the idea that the people who are spending more in order to keep people homeless want it to be that way. That they're not actually interested in saving the money. They're not actually interested in efficient systems. They're not actually interested in all of that. They want people to be homeless. They want people to be poor. They want people to be desperate. And they are willing to spend more to make sure that it stays that way. Because the desperation existing in the populace is a feature to them. It's not a bug. Bubble Guppy, the argument for financial savings obviously isn't the reason we don't have UBI. The same arguments for single-payer healthcare in the U.S. falls on deaf ear. What could be the reason? I think I kind of... Yeah, we got ahead of one another, right? I genuinely do believe that the suffering that is part of the society currently is seen as a feature. So, like something like Medicare, if you give poor Americans Medicare, well, then they won't join the military, will they? Right? If you get rid of student debt, right? Well, then people won't be beholden to corporations and again the military, right? As far as the capitalist system is concerned, there are many benefits to keeping people poor, right? You want people to be poor. Get rid of homelessness equals get rid of crime rates and prostitution that the people who create this homelessness complain about. Yep. Hey, at least I'm not homeless, so I'll keep selling my labor and being exploited for minimum wage. Yeah, exactly. Inefficiency in capitalism? Say it ain't so. Say it ain't so, wee-oh. Oh, here's something I should point out. There is a rally for public housing for all in Vancouver, 33rd Avenue and Ontario, 4 to 6 p.m. Anybody living in Vancouver, maybe take a look at that, see if you can participate. Oops, I definitely put a dot on the end of that. Is that still going to work? Yeah, good. Okay. And just something I wanted to throw out there. Anybody living in Vancouver or in the Vancouver area, maybe think about getting linked into this. We have to be focusing on protest movements. Protest is the way now. That we can't be pretending like electoral politics is going to resolve our issues. And like we are starting to see the further collapse of capital, right? Like, so this comes... this is St. John, New Brunswick. Rent going from $850 to $1,800, right? That's basically a doubling in rent, a little over a doubling in rent, in fact. An enormous jump. And what's starting to happen throughout Canada and the United States is as the wealthy are buying up the housing, it's creating what I'm starting to call business ghost towns, right? So you have all the rich people own all the property, right? And in some cases, the rich people that own the property don't even live in the area. And what do? They jack the rent, right? They jack the price of housing. So normal, regular citizens can't actually move into the area. And because the regular citizens can't move into the area, it means that the jobs that exist there in your cafes, in your grocery stores, in your businesses, can't find workers. So it is exactly as Marx said, that capitalism destroys itself. And it destroys itself in this particular case by the wealthy owning all the property and refusing to rent at a rate that anybody can afford, and the wages no longer pay for the cost of living, and so the capitalist system stops working. We can't find workers to actually do the work because the wages we're paying don't pay for the basic cost of living in the area. And this is going to become the common. So all of the services that capitalism purports to offer its citizens will eventually cease to exist simply because workers cannot live in the areas where the wealthy live. I live in a senior mobile home park. This year we formed a co-op and bought the park. Good for you, bud. Good for you. Good for you, dude. I love to hear that kind of shit. Fuck these capitalists. Like, they are worthless. Like, this is the thing that people don't really understand. That, like, there's still this idea that's pervasive in the society where people are genuinely walking around being like, capitalists are hard workers and they're smart and intelligent and it takes lots of effort to be a CEO and all this. And it's like, no, it fucking doesn't. It takes no effort whatsoever to be a CEO. Do you know what CEOs do? They tell other people to go do work for them. That's what they do. That if they are ever confronted with a situation where they actually have to do work, they just tell somebody else to do it. Because they're paid so much. If you're making $26 million a year as a CEO, right? Like what's here? Let's use real numbers. What's the average wage of a CEO? Okay, so if you're making 77, like if you're making $1 million, 75th, 90th, if you're making like $1 million, you literally just like hire people to do your work for you, right? And this chief executive officer salary, and this is literally like on the low end of things. Like there are CEOs that make like $30 million. There are CEOs that make like $100 million. If you're making that kind of money, you literally just hire assistants and they do all your work for you, right? Like somebody told me like, hey dude, you're the CEO, you're gonna make $1 million. I would be like, great, so this guy's making $1.2 million. I literally would take $200,000, hire 2 assistants, and I would go fuck off to Tahiti and make them do all the work. Like literally just call in to me every so often and I'll be like, hey, how's it going? And they'll be like, oh yeah. And that's it. Like, like, who thinks that this is hard? They're talking about lockdowns and the amount of people that have been getting vaccines now went up to 1,000 a day. Huh, I guess getting the vaccine is suddenly working. Yeah, exactly. Are bonuses in those averages? Yeah, exactly. Mobile homes are a bad name because they're buying mobile homes stop people from renting from a landlord. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, the landlords. Won't someone please think of the landlords? Okay, guys, I hate to do this, but we're going to do a chair stream for just a minute. I have to take an impromptu break. One moment. Chair stream. We all love the chair. Chair stream. Chair stream, how I dare. Chair. Yeah, and paying assistants $100,000 a year is good pay for an assistant. That's exactly it, right? That's why I always use $100,000, because it's like anyone would do any job for $100,000 in this society. Like, if somebody walked up to me and said, like, hey, dude, I need you to do, anything, and I'll give you $100,000, people would be like, great. Alex, don't say that. Oh, it's so heartbreaking. We used to rent until about 12 years ago. Best thing is no one above me and no one below. Well, and stupid things are happening in the rental market now, right? Like, now the rent is actually higher than a mortgage, right? And so lots and lots of people are pointing out, like, hey, like, how come I can't get a mortgage? Like, a mortgage is like $500 a month. Rent is $1,000 a month. Like, so I can pay $1,000 in rent, but I can't get a $500 mortgage? What the fuck is going on, right? Because the system is breaking down. It's no longer actually functioning. Here's some great, for those of you who don't know, I have an evangelical Christian background. If you stick around on the stream for long enough, I will start talking about some Christian shit, because I love to talk about it. It's near and dear to my heart, absolutely. I consider myself a secularist, but I still consider myself a theologian. So you try to square those circles until I actually get talking about it. So you're going to hear shit like this from me. And then Jesus drug tested everyone using taxpayer money before deciding if the lazy, freeloading masses were worthy enough to receive fish and bread. I can't feed these people. It will destroy their incentive to better themselves. Once their urine tested clean, Jesus reminded them that this was a temporary assistance and warned against becoming dependent on his handouts. He went on to explain that tax revenues were actually for corporate subsidies and funding wars. The word of the Lord, the word of Jesus Christ. Yeah, who doesn't want a little spot of their own? Well, and like, as the society collapses, like as the capitalist system stops working, and as the methods of distribution start to break down, and honestly, as climate change begins to spread famine, right? A lot of the land that exists here in the cities is going to have to be repurposed and going to have to be turned into gardens. It's an inevitability. It's an inevitability. That, like, if you're walking down the street and you see a lawn, that lawn will turn into a garden. Like, it will turn into a garden. Because the seriousness of the famines that are going to come our way because of climate change are going to threaten urban life in serious, serious ways. And I mean, like, we all kind of joke and say, like, hey, why don't we convert the golf courses? Yeah, good question. Why don't we convert the golf courses, right? And, like, there is an urban gardening movement that certainly exists within Toronto, but, like, we are going to have to actually do that shit. Like, it's going to have to become much, 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 much more serious than what we're doing now. And, like, community gardens will become so ubiquitous because they have to be. Water is a big deal. Yeah, my mom in Eastern Washington State, their city is having to drill a deeper well. I mean, you want to talk about water concerns? What was it? The Nevada water shortage. Was it Nevada? Or was it Colorado? Yeah. So what you're looking at here, right? This is the river. I think it's called the Colorado River, if I'm not mistaken. But it's the river that goes into the Hoover Dam. Okay? You see this white line here? That's where the water used to be. The water used to be at that level all along this river system. Now the water is down in this area. People are starting to say that the Hoover Dam is going to stop producing power because the water flow that's coming through it is no longer capable of actually producing the power they need in order to keep Las Vegas going, and this is of course having profound effects throughout the entire region. So we are looking at massive droughts because if we eventually, you all know it's coming. Google Maps, Google Maps, Google Maps, Google Maps, Google Maps, Google Maps, Google Maps. Like, this is a desert system, right, that exists in the United States and goes up into Canada. This desert system is spreading. Here in Nevada, let's just quickly Hoover Dam. Heckin', right? So this whole water system is starting to shrink, right? It's starting to deplete. You can see, right? There are even sections of it. It's just getting nice and narrow, nice and thin. So if this water system that exists throughout this desert system dries up, then you're looking at a real Dust Bowl situation. You're looking at a real situation, and as you can see, it goes all through, all the way down, and a lot of this green area really relies on this water. And it's starting to dry up. It's starting to fall into decline and disrepair. Do I have this bookmark? Is that it? I have this great thing. Sometimes people come in and they try to pretend like capitalism is working. And I got to remember to do this. So on the left, right, this is 2011. On the right is 2016. And I can slide it. That's what it used to look like. That's what it's like now. Capitalism, 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 it doesn't work, right? Like, the water tables in the United States are beginning to dry up, and then simultaneously, while The fresh water is starting to dry up. We are going to experience rising water tables all along the coasts that are going to wipe out major sections. If we go down here to Louisiana, which is currently dealing with massive storms, so this is what the water table looks like right now around Louisiana. If the water table goes up 1 meter, so that's 3 feet, which is likely to happen soon, well, boom, New Orleans is basically done, right? Like major flooding, major infrastructure. You go up 2 meters, you go up 3 meters. Like Louisiana is essentially finished. That people should leave Louisiana. And so simultaneously, while freshwater sources are drying up, saltwater sources are going to start encroaching. And you're going to see here in Florida, right? Major issues along the coast. Major issues. And eventually you do get up to a situation where, like, Florida's going to be underwater. Like, that's going to happen. New York, same kind of story. Right? Think about the displacement that's going to happen in New York as water tables begin to go up, as water tables begin to rise. Even a meter causes major problems in Long Island. So we're facing, like, major crises on all fronts. And the end result, it's very difficult to see how we avoid a famine. Well, if making 22 to get treated like crap by your patrons and our bosses is great, yeah, exactly. But the desert wasn't that big because of the buffalo and the grazing, yeah. And the Americans and Canadians killed off buffalo. Millions of them, too. Yeah, people were paid by the government to just go around and shoot buffalo because going around and shooting buffalo was an attack against the Indian, right? It was an attack against the First Nations people. Yeah, and they were in the way of building roads and building cities. Well, they were just killing the food source for the First Nations people. It's just yet another assault. And meanwhile, the buffalo end up being one of the most crucial and important aspects of the prairie system. Did you see all the flooding in New York and New Jersey this week? I did not. Flooding in New York. That's certainly going to be big news. Oh, wait, yes, I did actually hear something about that. I have a great tweet that really... Every single subway line in New York City is now shut down to the storm. The entire system. We are beyond ready. We are beyond not ready for climate change. Right? Yep, I think that is the case. Historic New York area flooding leaves at least 18 dead. Trapped in basements and cars, they lost their lives in savage storm. Okay, buddy, you are losing your little mind, but you're out of peanut butter, right? Like, and these storms are only getting worse. They're only going to get worse. And what you're going to see as the heat increases, where's my map? Where is my map? Did I just lose my map? Google Map. As the heat increases, so what it does, the heat increases, right, and sucks more and more moisture right out of the earth itself, right? It sucks it up. The desert spreads, and so that means you get longer periods of drought where the moisture is getting sucked up, and then because the earth is a system, that moisture goes into the system, and then it manifests itself in bigger hurricanes because there's more moisture and there's more water in the hurricane system, and then it dumps down in larger and larger ways. And so things are getting more and more extreme. And if you ask the government what's the plan, I guess we're looking at it. Yeah. Yep. Like we are, this incremental liberalism that we're doing, and you can see full blown, this is their plan in the here, let's get like real specific with this. My favorite thing to do in the last hour of this is to find stuff and get real specific. Where's their climate change? Creating 1 million jobs. Yeah, okay. A cleaner, greener future. Oops. Come on, John. Come on, John. Come on. What are you doing? Where the Climate change, page 48. 48. Right? So you can see it. Like, what, delivering on our climate commitments, all that kind of garbage. So a re-elected continue to put a rising price on pollution while putting more money back into the pockets of Canadians. Not going to remove the subsidies, right? Not going to actually remove the fossil fuel subsidies. Moreover, not actually going to apply the price of carbon to fossil fuel industry. So the very industry that we need to actually put prices on carbon on are exempt. Keep protecting Canadian jobs and competitiveness through smart carbon. It's a meaningless statement, doesn't mean anything. Move forward in collaboration with key trading partners like the United States and the European Union and ExxonMobil, right? And those private industry people. And like this is it. Like make sure the oil and gas sector reduces emission at a pace and scale needed to achieve net zero by 2050. So they're talking about achieving net zero by 2050 when we need to be achieving net zero by 2030. This achieve net, and the phrase itself, net zero, is very cynical, right? That net zero doesn't mean we stop polluting. It means that we pretend as though the activity we do over here to capture carbon balances it out. It's the Liberals' plan is fundamentally to attempt to negotiate with the sun, right? That's the Liberal plan. The Liberal plan is to look at the sun that's going to burn the earth to a crisp and say, yeah, we can negotiate with that. The sun will understand. Look, the sun sees that we're trying to do incremental reform. The sun is going to understand that it takes time to transition, right? The sun is something that we can negotiate with because we're good, powerful human beings, and we're the most powerful force on the planet, right? It's this embarrassing kind of self-grift at this point, this liberal belief that we literally can negotiate with the fucking sun. No, you can't, dude. No, you can't. That when the fires burn our shit down and when the famines start, right, it's going to unleash forces on the planet that we will not be able to control. That famines create desperation. The four horsemen of the apocalypse, as they ride through, are not going to stop and pat liberals on the head and be like, thank you for your contribution, right? They're not going to negotiate. Just how you don't negotiate with death, that when your time comes, that's it. If the earth wants to take you, you get taken. Too fucking bad for you, right? Too fucking bad for you, right? In the same way, when the sun starts to burn your shit down, too bad for you. It's not a negotiation. This is the thing these liberals got to put two and two together. This isn't a fucking negotiation, right? There are hard rules that we are aware of. We know what the rules are. And this idiotic negotiation that the liberals are attempting to put us into is going to burn our shit down, right? Yeah, sea levels rising incrementally. It's good to see money will still be changing hands as the world burns. Yeah, it's good that this literal thing we invented, money isn't real. This is the craziest part about this, right? When you start putting this together, this is when you when people stand up and say, "Well, if you do all that, what about the economy? What about the economy? What about the fake shit that we literally create out of nowhere? We literally create money out of nothing." Wait, money, you want money? I got money. We literally create it. And we have focused ourselves as a people on the manic, idiotic path of accruing as much of this literal, ephemeral nothing that we create out of thin air. That this is what we're hyper-focused on. This is the thing. I gotta get as much of this imaginary nonsense as possible in a pile. That's what we gotta do. Yeah, and once I have all of this imaginary nonsense in a pile, I'll be the best and everything will be better. Yeah. And so when people say, what about the economy? I'm just fuck you. Go get fucked. Go away. Right? What about the fucking air? What about the fucking food? What about the fucking sun? Right? What about things that are real, that exist in the world and were here before we got here? What about the tangible, real things that we don't create out of nowhere. Like, shut the fuck up. How about that? How about we actually concern ourselves with grown-up things instead of this pretend childish nonsense? Like, this is how childish we are as a people. That we're literally playing pretend to death. Right? That's what this is. We created money out of nothing. We invented it because we thought that it would be a good idea. And so we're playing pretend. And we're going to play pretend until the atmosphere thins or is full of so much carbon that the sun will just burn our crops on the field and we will starve to death. Humanity, man. Yet to be seen if there's intelligent life on the planet. Yeah, just followed me on Twitter. Another reason to go on Twitter. Fantastic, Alex. I'm so happy. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everybody. Like, share, subscribe. Send $1 my way if you want. Right? I got a Patreon down in the description. Even $1 helps. Yeah, it gets you into the Discord. You can start to organize from there. We need a guy to come in with a plan to do everything he or she didn't tell anyone and just do everything that needs doing, then leave politics. But it doesn't matter if there's no planet. Yeah, exactly, Ruth. Exactly. Like, genuinely what we need at this stage in the game is people who are getting involved in the political system through protest, through the threat of revolution, quite straightforwardly, through the threat of revolution, outright saying, we need to stop this shit. It's time to be grown-ups. Like, it's time to be grown-ups. Like, Justin Trudeau was, like, great for, like, a dreamy, like, oh, he's such a dreamboat kind of thing. But that's some little girl shit. Like, it's time to grow up. It's time to look at the situation like an adult. It's time to do that thing that conservatives say that we should be doing, which is take responsibility and you know, do some sacrifices and actually make tough decisions. Conservatives aren't actually interested in that because conservatives are about 5 years old. Like, people like Jordan Peterson, people like Ben Shapiro, right? Everybody in the Conservative Party tapped out at 5. They didn't actually grow past there. That's why all their positions sound like 5-year-old positions. They're literally just like, girls are icky, right? Like, that's their entire perception of feminism right there. Girls are icky. My daddy said so. That's a big thing in these circles. Like, my daddy said that, so if my daddy said it, so that's important. What are you complaining about, my little guy? So I'm like, it's and all of the shit that they say about how the society should be run, they don't adhere to at all. My absolute favorite, because now we're talking about Crucified, right? My absolute favorite is that these guys are walking around saying, we need to protect Western, we need to protect Western civilization. The Judeo-Christian tradition needs to be protected. Oh, well, the Judeo-Christian, oh, okay. So you care about the Judeo-Christian tradition and the Western civilization, so that means the Bible, so that means Jesus Christ. Guess what? Jesus Christ said, give your money to the poor. Are you giving your money to the poor? No, these people need to pull themselves up, and they've got to do their own work, or they'll be disincentivized, you know, the way that Christ said. So these people are children. They don't even read their own texts. And more importantly than any of that, they don't even care about their own children, right? Climate change is going to wipe out their own children, and they don't give a fuck at all. Like, they don't care even a little about that shit. They're not concerned about it at all. Because once you fall for, like, the evangelical Christian trap of, the Extinction Rebellion is doing real shit in London. Let's take a look. London Extinction Rebellion. Let's take a look. What do we see? Extinction Rebellion protesters break bail terms for city protest. Environmental demonstrators disobey orders to stay away from London financial. Great. No, great. Like, these forms of rebellion are completely necessary. They're completely necessary, right? Always remember, things like the Holocaust were legal, right? Things like apartheid is legal. The apartheid that exists in Israel and Palestine is legal. So here in Canada, there is actually an understanding of that built in the legal system, which is why public protest, and the blocking of infrastructure is actually legal. Aaron O'Toole has said that he wants to criminalize it, which in my view makes him the most dangerous fascist that exists in Canada. And yet he's going to be the fucking leader of the nation for some fucking reason, because we're extremely stupid and gullible as a people. And we absolutely need to be disobeying. Like, we absolutely need to be disobeying. And forcing these police to realize that they're on the wrong side, right? I am actually starting to see that here in Toronto. I am starting to see that Toronto police officers are viewing these protests, the protests that I help organize and that I go to, that there are police who are looking at us being like, yeah, I mean, the choice is going to be between us allowing you to do that or us beating the shit out of you, and we don't want to. And like, once you get police on your side, once a movement gets police on the side where the police refuse to actually do the bidding of the capitalist class, you've won, right? It's essentially over. There have been like enormous tyrants and authoritarian dictatorships that have collapsed in a week because the police said like, yeah, no, we're not going to fight. Like they get ordered to like open fire on groups of people, and the police just go like, no, we're not going to do that, and that's it. That's the end of it. And similar things can happen here, but what it requires more than anything else is protest movements that actually get people into the streets. Right now, shamefully, the strongest protest movement that exists here in Canada, in Toronto rather, is the anti-mask movement. Right? They can get upwards of 1,000 people out sometimes, right? When I do an anti-poverty protest, I'm happy if I get 20. So something's got to give. Something's got to give, and hopefully it will, and hopefully it will soon. But I'm glad to see that the Extinction Rebellion is actually doing something real, because like. And this is another strategy, right? Find some, like Etten Stott, who won gold in the canoe slalom in Britain in the 2012 London Olympics, right? Like, get people who are prominent in your society. Like, if we could get, like, a local celebrity here in Toronto, hell, not even a local celebrity, right? And this flows into my major critique of the online leftists that exist, right? I don't like to critique other leftists. I don't like to do that kind of backbiting thing where I find like a technical point and then try to make a video to be like, oh, John absolutely slays David Dole on this issue, right? Like that kind of shit. Like I hate that, and I never watch those videos. Like when Sam Cedar and Jimmy Dore go after each other, I never bother because it's just a waste of time. And it's always like stupid technical point scoring on like leftist kind of stuff. That is the antithesis of what the movement should be about. But I will lay this critique at the online leftists. People like David Dole, people like Thought Slime, people like Lance from the Surfs, right? They are not mobilizing their people, their followers into a protest movement. They are not mobilizing their people. David Dole has, from the Rational National, has 400,000 followers. He has 400,000 subscribers. If this guy said, hey, October 4th, 2 p.m., Yonge and Dundas Square, we're going to have a protest against poverty, 1,000 people would show up, for sure, right? If he actually promoted it and he actually made it a thing. But he doesn't. And so my critique of these online leftists, is that they care more about their business than they care about the movement. That as long as they are having their rent paid, and as long as people listen to their essays and the points that they make, many of which I don't care about the theory. If I agree or disagree, I think that's almost irrelevant. I'm just happy that they are in the discourse at all. But they're not mobilizing their people. And they should be. They absolutely should be. And we as people should start saying to these guys, why aren't you going to protests? Why aren't you organizing protests? Why aren't you part of the protest movement? Why are you just sort of sitting there reporting on the protest movements as they come about? Kind of like shaking your head, right? Like David Dole does, right? He just sort of shakes his head and goes, well, concerning, right? Well, dude, like, we are at a point now, like, we don't need reporters. We don't need essayists. We need people on the streets, right? And I don't really care if you agree or disagree with me on theoretical issues or any of this kind of stuff. We need people to be mobilized, and we need them into the streets. And I don't see it from the leftists at all. I don't see it at all. Have I asked David if he would? I mean, I have sent tweets. Of course, they're not going to respond. Who am I? Right? Who am I? The guy's got 400,000 followers. He doesn't need to listen to anybody. Yeah, there was hey Miranda, how you doing? Good to see you. There was about 500 people at Young and College today for the anti-vax protest today. Yeah. Was there one today even? Oh, wow. They usually are on Saturdays. So that's concerning to find out that movement is starting to spread and grow. Because the anti-vax movement has become a fascist movement. That they are, like, you can go talk to them and just, like, they're very open about their organizing and all of that. Like, they go and harass minority, like, if a like they'll go and harass a restaurant because the restaurant is, like, requiring masks or something. But they always go to, like, a Vietnamese place. They always go to, like, a Chinese place, right? They're not going to, like, an Italian restaurant, right? I'm glad when we went to the housing protest at Yonge and Dundas, there were only 3 anti-vaxxers. Yeah. And Alex, were you at the housing? Were you at the housing protest at Yonge and Dundas with the the Canada housing protest that's on Discord there? Those guys, I'm really happy to see that people are organizing along housing issues, but those guys don't see the poverty advocates as their allies, as their natural allies. And they don't quite understand what's happening in the housing market. And so their solutions are not going to work. Like building more housing, whatever. Build as much housing as you want. The billionaires will buy it. Rezone, okay. The billionaires will buy it. Right? Oh, you were with Socialist Action. Great. Oh, great, dude. Great. A good organization, strong and true. And it's not about the masks, it's about power. Yeah. And I think that there's lots of people who have found some kind of meaning in just the fact that, yeah, exactly. Blocking the street for 3 hours, yelling at people, called me a sheep for wearing my mask to go get coffee. Yeah. You don't need to, like, what a bunch of rubes. Like, what a bunch of fucking rubes. Like, here's the thing that I think is actually despicable about the anti-maskers, right? Is that they will talk all they want about, like, my freedom, my choice, like, my thing, all that kind of stuff. Well, if it's my freedom, my choice, then I choose to wear a mask, right? Like, if I actually am very much of the opinion that after this is all over, like once COVID goes away and we get back to some semblance of normalcy, I'm for sure going to keep wearing the mask. I'm going to continue wearing the mask in public spaces just for the fact that I haven't been sick. I used to get sick about 3 times a year. And since I started wearing the mask in public, I haven't been sick at all. I haven't gotten the flu. I haven't gotten anything. So I'm going to keep doing it. Right? And if some idiot anti-masker comes up and says, like, well, what are you wearing your mask for? You don't have to wear that anymore. I'll be like, look, it's my choice. So slag off. Right? Like, I'm not a sheep for doing it. I literally just don't want to get sick. And you go to, like, Asian countries, China, Japan, right, Vietnam, all these guys, people, like, wearing masks is part of the normal culture. That, like, if they are feeling sick or if they feel like they want to not be sick or any of that kind of stuff, they'll put the mask on as a common courtesy to the people around them. And that's how it's viewed. That people look at them and they say, oh, that person's wearing a mask. They must either be feeling sick or they feel vulnerable. And so it's just a common courtesy. And fundamentally what these anti-maskers are saying is that their perception of the world is the correct perception of the world. So fundamentally, they can get fucked. Yeah, Alex, I helped organize their presence there with Daniel. Fantastic. Fantastic. Because what I'm seeing with those kinds of movements, like those guys are like, they would consider themselves like middle class people, right? They're the people who have the jobs, who feel like they should be able to afford housing, right? They should be able to buy a house, all that kind of stuff. They've made all the sacrifices, they made all the right decisions, right? But now they can't get a job. But they don't really have an accurate critique of what their society looks like, right? So they take a look at poverty activists and they don't quite realize that the poverty activists are in, like, it's the same game. Like, they don't understand that. They still think that there's some kind of individualism at play. They still think that they are in a class above. They don't really recognize that, well, no, you're just working class like we are, bud. Just that the promise you were given, like, we were abandoned a long time ago, and now you're being abandoned. So, and if those two kind of groups figured it out and actually connected with one another and realized that they have common cause with one another, that would be very effective and very dangerous for the ruling class. But they're not there yet. They're not there yet, which makes sense. They're just starting. I agree with Trudeau on the rudeness and lack of empathy, and they are acting like a terrorist group. Well, and there's a lot of just like irrational anger, right? Like, that's something to think about as well. That like people don't intellectualize and then act, right? People act and then in retrospect intellectualize, right? That's how people actually work. That justifications are created after the fact, and so a lot of the what's happening in the anti-mask stuff, especially the protests that are surrounding Trudeau, is just expressions of rage that aren't rooted in any kind of intellectual kind of thing. It's just literally people like, I am mad the pandemic is happening. I am mad the pandemic is happening, and our leader is Justin Trudeau, and he had an election, and I'm going to go protest because I don't want this pandemic to happen anymore. Right? And it's not really rational, right? Yeah, I understand, Alex. Yeah, for sure. Fascism is the ideology that promises to crush the enemies you are afraid of, and will give you enemies if you don't already have one. Yeah, there's truth to that too. You can tell something is a bad idea based on whether the PPC endorses it. Yeah. The PPC, man. My hope, I would love to see the Conservative Party really expel from their ranks their fascists and just get those fascists in the PPC. Like, I'm more than happy to have the fascists go into like a small little PPC party that's explicitly fascist. There they are, you can see them. Than where they are now, which is like embedded in the Conservative Party and infecting the Conservative Party with a populace that's pretending like that's not happening. Like, that's the craziest thing to me, is that like Aaron O'Toole's literally walking around going, Canada first. Yeah, that's a Ku Klux Klan slogan is a normal thing for a leader to say. Oh yeah, bud. I understand. Just went out to a store and handed out my first flyer. While the guy declined, he did give me some motivation and told me to strive for what I believe in. Just wanted to share. Good for you, bud. Tape it up on poles. Tape that shit up on poles. Like, go to your library. Go to your the education centers, right? Wherever you think people are most likely to be sympathetic to what you're doing, and put a flyer up. Handing flyers out is good, though. That's really excellent, bud. Good for you, Nick. Good for you, bud. Get the right masks off. Drive the crypto fascists out of hiding in the cons and make them own it in the PPC. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that is possible to happen if the Conservatives can't attain power, right? If the Conservatives get to a point where they realize that they can't attain power, that they will never actually get to their majority, that's when... And it's funny because I actually think the Conservatives are better at doing this than liberals are. That when it comes time to actually do some soul searching, when it comes time to ask serious questions internally, when it comes time to actually look at one another and be like, what the fuck is happening? Why can't we get this majority? Why are we being rejected by Canadians? I think that conservatives are better at it than liberals. And so the hope is that once they do that soul searching and once they actually look at each other and say, like, okay, what's happening? Why are we being rejected? That the answer comes back because you've got fucking fascists in your party, dude. Like, you've got outright fascists. And not like people who like hold views that could be construed to be fascist, but literally. Like Derek Sloan was a fascist. Like, he was an outright fascist who like literally took the mask off so that he could tell the Ministry of Health to go back to China. Like, straight up. His expulsion from the Conservative Party was well deserved, and he gets martyred for it. And so, and there are others. Like, there are lots of others that exist in the Conservative Party. The problem is that if you go through your ranks and get rid of the fascists right now, you'll certainly won't have the position. I'm actually going to do some postering for SA with a fellow comrade on Saturday. Good for you, bud. I got some posters myself. I'm going to be going through the beaches. Hey, John, what's your opinion on mandatory vaccinations in workplaces? My work just became mandatory today, and we're an Indigenous agency. Just curious what you think. Dude, I don't get why people are fighting. I don't get why people are fighting. Like, my entire life, I was told about polio, the mumps, measles, and that we created these vaccines and we used them, and sure, a small percentage of the populace had negative reactions to them. That's gonna happen. That's not worse than fucking polio. And everybody got their vaccination. Everybody ended up with a vaccination record, what we're calling vaccine passports now, in like an embarrassing, obvious, like right-wing conspiracy nut job twisting of what's actually happening. Like, there's no such thing as a vaccine passport. It's called vaccination records. Everybody gets them. Everybody has them. They've existed for 100 fucking years. And if your workplace says, like, hey, if you want to keep working here, you've got to have the vaccine, okay. I don't see that much differently than, like, lots of things that workplaces tell you. Like, hey, if you want to drive a car, you need to have a license. Like, hey, if you want to shoot a gun, like, if you want to own a gun in Canada, you have to have a fucking license. Like, this is normal shit. Like, it's so mundanely normal that the idea that there are, like, big protest movements against it tells you how fucking childish we are. Like, tells you how fucking childish we are. Like, get the jab, man. Get the fucking vaccine. I don't like, what's the crybabyism about? Like, what is this? Yeah, Delta is bad. I give shutdowns a couple of weeks. They're not going to shut shit down, Ruth. They're not going to do that. Christmas is coming. Christmas is coming. Ba 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 ba. Ho 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 ho. Christmas is coming. They're not going to shut shit down for Christmas. If corporate capitalism, if neoliberal capitalism misses one Christmas, it is the end of neoliberal capitalism. They cannot afford to miss Christmas. That Christmas is not a Christian holiday. It's not even a holiday, right? Christmas is a business event where the capitalists make all of their money because they have convinced a gullible population that now is the time to replace the time we've stolen from you, between you and your family members and you and the people you care about, to replace that time with an item, right? That instead of actually spending time with one another, that you're going to pour all of your guilt and angst and take all of the fake money we've given you in replacement for the actual life that you're missing between you and your family, so that you can take all of that energy and put it into a little item, right? So we're going to give you money that you're going to give right back to us in replace for some stupid bauble that you're going to give to your kid so that you can tell them that they love them, right? And so that you literally can watch your kid go like this. That's it. That's the whole thing. So that they can go, oh, thanks, Dad. Hug, hug, play with it for 5 minutes, garbage bin. Right? Like, that's the system. And Christmas is an attempt to replace love with shit. And if we miss one Christmas, that's the end of neoliberal capitalism. They cannot recover. That they literally cannot recover. So, as we go into this Delta wave, right? We saw it with the second wave. The exact thing happened in the second wave. I saw it happen. They're not going to shut this shit down. They might go to like curbside or whatever, but they're not going to shut shit down. And we're going to keep playing that game, by the way, until the disaster gets so bad that the vaccines no longer work and the virus is deadly, right? Like right now you can survive it, right? Well, as we keep fucking around and finding out, and as we keep dicking around, and as the Earth is like, okay, well, flu +1, flu +2, flu +3, flu +4, right? As it keeps ramping it up and ramping it up and ramping it up, as it keeps ramping and ramping and ramping up, the capitalists are going to keep trying to keep the game going until eventually no one is going to be willing to do the work because the virus will have mutated to become so fucking deadly and so fucking contagious. Like, the Earth is telling us to stay home. Like, I don't know what to tell you here. Like, the Earth is obviously saying, fucking stay home. Like, it's super easy. Just stay home. And we're just like, no, capitalism. Like we're a bunch of fucking babies. And we could have knocked this out real quickly. There are places that did. There are places that knocked this COVID thing out in months. That they literally were just like, okay, proper lockdown, actually take care of shit, everybody stay home, systems to distribute food, no contact shit, all that kind of stuff, and it's gone. We did it. Meanwhile, here in fucking the West, we're literally like, we can negotiate with a virus. Like, just like the liberals think that they can negotiate with the fucking sun, the capitalists are convincing us that we can fucking negotiate with a virus. It's not how it works. It's not how it fucking works. Yeah, Earth wants a general strike. Well, and what's so funny is that I perceive the Earth in all of this as, like, literally, like, the Earth has us, we're a little baby, right? And the Earth has us, and it's just like, oh, my little humans. Oh, my little humans. And we're, like, squalling around, like, vomiting on the Earth, like, smacking at the Earth, because we're just, like, a little monster. And it's going, oh, you need to calm down a little. So I'm just going to give you just a little, to calm you down. And instead of calming down, we're just fucking squalling more, right? And eventually, as we just keep damaging the Earth and keep damaging the Earth, like the Earth can literally create a shell of ice around itself. That's one of the powers that the Earth has. We know that it can do it, right? The Earth can also just desertify itself, right? That's another thing that it can do. Like, the Earth can do shit. Like, we can't even comprehend. The Earth can rotate itself on its own axis. Right? It can literally go like, the shit that the Earth is capable of doing, like, what we're dealing with right now is literally like the Earth just sort of like just throwing shit our way. Just being like, can't help but notice that you're squalling a little bit too much, so deal with that for a little bit. Maybe that'll calm you down. And it's just going to keep ramping it up and keep ramping it up and keep ramping it up until we finally figure out that the way to deal with this is to stop. But if we do that, then the neoliberal capitalist system stops. And if you do that, then the babies that own this place don't get to do things, and that's not good. For a minute, I thought by love you lost, I meant the people who died during the pandemic because COVID being replaced with a little toy. Oh yeah. The Moo variant is a thing now, of course. The Marvel Universe variant. Yeah. Are you coming to the Labor Day rally, by the way? I'm singing at it. Oh, wow. I'm definitely coming now. That's September 6th, right? Yeah, I think I actually can make that. I have a job on the weekends now. I work at a cafe now. So that's really constraining what I'm capable of doing. But, you know, you got to pay the bills. You got to pay the bills. Which is a great time to say if you want to help me pay my bills, I got a donation box down below, Patreon down below. Even $1 helps. Oh yeah, it's just a standard cafe, but it's not a corporate. It's not corporate. It's a four-star chef owns a restaurant, and he has a cafe off on the side of it, and good tips, good clientele. So you got to do what you got to do, right? You got to do what you got to do. And they even feed me. Can you believe that? I go in there and they give me food. What the fuck? All right, guys, it's getting to be about that time. Always remember, and I'm not saying this flippantly, I genuinely mean this. Each and every one of you is a divine being, standing in divine energy. There is no one above you, and there is no one below you. These billionaires spend billions of dollars to make you forget it. Don't let them. Good luck. We're going to need it.